I would like to call our October commission meeting to order. Thank you so much for joining us in Chillicothe, Missouri this morning. And I don't know, I fell asleep to the sound of a thunderstorm with some rain, which is the best way with the conditions that we're having right now to fall asleep. So excited to be here in Chillicothe. To get started, I would like to welcome our director, Jason Sumners, to the podium.
Morning, commissioners, staff, attendants. Appreciate you all being here. We had a great day yesterday. Thank Northwest Region for hosting us out at Fountain Grove. We got to celebrate the ribbon cutting on the brand new pump station, which is a long time in the making. So that was a great event. Held our executive session out there, and then had the great opportunity to honor George Seek, a longtime conservationist and someone who's had a real significant impact on this area. And so a great way to start our time here in Chillicothe. So this month has been, since our last meeting, a ton of travel for the team, myself and many others, as well as the commission, but had the chance earlier in September to attend the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, which is where all 50 state fish and wildlife agencies come together to talk about shared conservation challenges, and had the opportunity at that time to address the entire attendees there, really tell a little bit about the history of the Department of Conservation and share some of our success stories. And so it's always a great time to get together, and I think, Commission, you'd be very, very proud of the leadership that many of our team provide in this forum, and it's just a great place for us to convene and talk about many challenges. As we discussed, much of that travel, it took us to Canada, able to have Commissioners Harrison, Wagner, and Eckelkamp join us in Canada, where we toured some really cool wetlands and grassland habitat, seeing some of the great work that our DU Canada partners are doing to put habitat on the ground, a place that's really, really critical for our breeding waterfowl and other migratory birds. And as you know, here we talk a lot about full life cycle conservation, and this is certainly a part of it. And I would also note at the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies meeting, we also celebrated 15 years of the Southern Wings program, a program that is kind of the counterpart to Fall Flights, in which money is sent to countries in Central and Mexico and Central America to support breeding populations of birds or overwintering populations of birds that spend their summers in Missouri. And so again, we think about the full suite of conservation actions needed to take care of these species. The last several weeks have also included a number of district coordination team visits. Andrew and Aaron and Laura, and we've drug Kyle along as well, have had the opportunity to go out and spend some time with our teams in the field. It's tailgate time, right? I mean, you just can't overstate the value of spending time with staff in the field where their passions with the work we do. It's also given us the opportunity to have some really, really cool conversations with conservation partners, whether that's communities or some really, really engaged and passionate landowners. And so, again, very, very good time in the field, and we still have a couple more of those visits to complete early in the month of November. We've had a couple of additional changes to the team as we kind of refill behind some of the vacancies that have been created. And so in the upper left, you'll see Dr. Sherry Russell, who's in the audience with us today. She has been serving as our Conservation Health Section Chief in Science Branch. She's our wildlife veterinarian, and she has been willing to step up and lead Science Branch. So very, very excited to have Sherry in that role. Below that, with the two giant bucks, a very passionate outdoorsman and a longtime private lands conservation agent, private lands conservationist, Josh Cushimano, has joined us as our ag liaison, and he's hit the ground running, making contacts, and so really, really excited to have Josh in that role. We think he'll be very effective. And a face that's becoming more familiar to you all, Kyle Atkinson joined us on October 1 as our new general counsel. We're absolutely excited to have Kyle on board, and staff know where he's at. They've been reaching out and making lots of good contacts, and so very, very much excited to have Kyle as part of the team. And then again, another face that is very familiar to many of you, Travis McLean, with Randy Doman's retirement. We are wishing Randy well, and he's been sending lots of smiling pictures, but we're certainly excited to have Travis serving in this new role as Protection Branch Chief. Speaking of recognizing staff for long and dedicated careers, a few weeks ago, the governor extended a special recognition to state team members that had served for 4 decades or longer. The MDC team had, I believe, the most folks recognized in this. We had 4 individuals recognized, and I want to mention them today: Gary Calvert, Scott McWilliams, Dennis Cook, and David Whitener. So these folks, long-term dedications, part of what we love about this place. Folks, professional careers align with their personal passions, and they're very, very much dedicated to the mission and the work that we do here. So again, a very, very heartfelt thank you to those individuals for their long time service. We're in the midst of certainly the most exciting time of the year for me and many others. Most of us have plans to depart here shortly after the meeting to enjoy the fall hunting seasons. So archery, fall deer and turkey hunting is certainly in full swing. We had the firearms antlerless portion of the antlerless portion of the firearms season a few weeks ago. Black bear season is open, and as of this morning, we'd successfully harvested 7 black bears. Elk hunting, archery hunting season is open, and as of last report, we'd had 2 successful archery hunters. Just a reminder, the firearms portion of that elk season will be in December. And waterfowl season's right around the corner. The kiddos will be after them in the middle and north zone tomorrow, including myself and my 10-year-old son. So looking forward to that. Lots of things great things continue to happen on the community conservation front. We've entered into a new agreement with Urban Rangers Corps in Kansas City. So the mission of the Urban Rangers is to prepare at-risk inner-city youth for responsible and productive futures. The goal of the partnership really is to educate and empower young citizens to address the importance of green spaces and native landscapes. And so we've partnered with the Urban Rangers to train participants on how to control invasive species and install and maintain native landscapes. And we hope to catalyze real change and foster a sense of responsibility in these communities. Again, our community conservation approach is really about meeting the communities where they are and finding those shared conservation-related missions. Last month, as you'll remember, the commission had an excellent tour of Shepherd of the Hills Conservation Education Center and the hatchery. Happy to report that staff are making pretty significant progress on installing the exhibits there. We've also been hosting some additional tours at the hatchery in the education center. So last week, Jake and team welcomed incoming State Senator Brad Hudson for a tour of the center and the hatchery. And then we're aiming for a December grand opening of the new education center. So it's been a long time coming. Again, another project that we're really excited about getting across the finish line, and it's going to be an incredible facility. I look forward to seeing how much the public appreciates that. Habitat work continues. It's a never-ending adventure. Missouri's glades are under constant threat from aggressive eastern red cedar encroachment and sun-loving invasive species. So the Ozark Region's Piney River District staff completed the first step of a glade restoration on Gist Ranch Conservation Area. This is located within the Current River Hills Glade Conservation Opportunity Area, which is a Tier 2 landscape. The work involved the removal of encroaching cedars, including prescribed fire once the cedar ages and begins to break down. The Ozark Region team also spot sprayed invasive species like Serratia lespedeza at Tingler Prairie Natural Area, a Tier 1 landscape. As you can see, the darker color Serratia, the blue dye makes it stand out, and the natural sinkholes with the federally threatened Virginia sneezeweed and native rose mallow blooming in the foreground. So staff are always very careful to make sure that they're treating the appropriate species. So our natural areas are incredibly important areas for harboring high-quality natural communities, and a repository for immense biodiversity, often some of the most imperiled plants that we have. Unfortunately, that doesn't mean natural areas are free from the risk of invasive species and other threats, and so that's why they are designated as a Tier 1 priority habitat. As such, especially the federally listed species, herbicide treatment are conducted with extreme caution and diligence to avoid impacts to those. Training continues to be a priority. The department hosted an inaugural resource management training conference on September 11th through the 13th at Lake of the Ozarks. This training was many, many years in the planning, brought together over 500 department employees from every branch that participated in at least some portion of the training conference. A multidisciplinary team of department employees planned the training conference based largely in part by input from department staff. This effort was largely led by Chris Riggert. I have to absolutely give him a shout out. I know there was a big team doing it, but there's always somebody who's the main ringleader, and Chris's efforts on this is very, very much appreciated. Provided a platform of multidisciplinary training opportunities which allow for individuals to network and collaborate both within and across their respective areas. Over 30 sessions on a number of topics across disciplines were available to staff and encourage all staff to step outside their discipline or their comfort zone to learn something new. The planning team is currently reviewing the feedback from the conference, but to date, the response has been overwhelmingly positive, and so we look forward to future training opportunities. And also remind folks, this is really the first time that we had an opportunity to bring staff back together on a discipline-specific basis since the major transformation. And so I think it really is another giant leap forward in the work of the agency. And so very, very much appreciate the team that pulled that together and all those that were in attendance. The Linscomb track dedication occurred on September 24th, so we joined a number of partners to dedicate and tour the barrier tract addition to the Linscomb Wildlife Area in St. Clair County. The land was purchased through a Build a Wildlife Area program with Pheasants Forever and Quail Forever. Purchase was made possible in large part by money donated by the late Dr. Harry and Lena Barrier for acquiring prairie lands. As we have talked many times, these prairies are absolutely critical habitat to Missouri's upper Osage grasslands. And so really excited about the opportunity to dedicate that tract. Community Private Lands branch conference occurred earlier this month. Our Community Private Lands Conservation branch hosted their conference in mid-October, really focusing on One Health. The group toured the community-based One Health efforts in Columbia that include the Columbia Center for Urban Agriculture, the Boone County Nature School, and several of our Tier 1 community geographies. I kind of crashed the party at the Boone County Nature School, had the opportunity to invite someone from a national level, Ann Kinzinger, who came in to visit the Circ Lab with USGS, and so she has responsibility over the network of USGS science centers across the country. And so again, the opportunity to share a little time with her explaining sort of some of the work we do, and then again the great work of CPLC to share those messages. Staff and partners also recognized for their outstanding service in the last 2 years. We participated in a recent recognition of the Missouri Community Forest Council Conference. Stan Stevens, who's pictured there on the left, was recognized for decades of advocating for trees, including the city of Herman's, to achieve their Tree City USA designation. At 85 years old, Stan helped each day with the inventory, measuring of tree diameter, the crown spread, and marking possible tree planting sites. The tree planting work he's done, met with contractors to confirm the planting locations, visited with homeowners to make sure they were aware of the maintenance of these trees that would needed to survive. So again, great recognition of him. All right, Lamine River carp removal work, as you are well aware, this is a project that the agency has been working on for a few years now. But staff again partnered with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks for a third straight year for removal of invasive carp from the Missouri River and its tributaries. Much of the previous work had been done in the Grand River. This is the first time we ventured into the Lamine River. The removal efforts on the Lamine River are over a 2-week period in September. During the first week alone, approximately 27,000 pounds of invasive carp were removed in 4 days. All invasive carp captured were given to the commercial partner, FKF Fisheries in Philadelphia, Missouri, processed for bait products for catfish, crayfish, and lobster. And so the team has made substantial progress on invasive carp removals and look forward to continued progress on this front. Science research updates. One of the many projects going on right now is developing a mussel sampling protocol to really study mussel habitat. Trying to implement a freshwater mussel survey to estimate the probability of detection in the current and the Jacks Forks rivers. The team is looking to design a multi-method sampling protocol for mussels that can be used across a wide variety of habitats. They're conducting the intensive mussel surveys in 9 stream reaches to map different habitats and study distribution across these unique habitats. They're really looking to summarize a fish-mussel host relationship based on data that is collected. These mussels serve as a very good indicator of the health of those landscapes in the system. And so it's a really important measure as we continue to implement habitat management actions both in the stream and in the watershed to determine the impacts of those management actions. Really excited to say that we've got over 300 individuals registered for the upcoming Partners Roundtable, representing more than 120 partner organizations. The 2024 theme focuses on embracing integrated conservation, which incorporates both natural resources and people's values, while recognizing that integration is vital to the long-term conservation success. Tony Wasley, a longtime colleague and friend from the Wildlife Management Institute, will serve as our keynote speaker. He'll be joined by 3 plenary panelists to round out the first day of the event on October 29th. Dr. Carl Malcolm, again, another friend and longtime conservation partner with U.S. Forest Service. Dr. Maya Moody, who we have had a very growing collaborative relationship with, is Missouri chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. And Tovar Cerulli, author of The Mindful Carnivore. So really, really excited about the opportunity to bring partners together. And I'll say it feels like the Partners Roundtable has really become something the partners have invested in, because I know there's the emails flying around. Everybody knows they're going to be in the same place at the same time. It's like, hey, let's have these conversations. So very excited about that opportunity. Another cool thing that has been going on for a while and sort of got fired back up again this year, MDC and Partners recently completed phase 3 of the brown-headed nuthatch reintroduction efforts in Missouri. In 2020 and 2021, we released 102 birds in the Mark Twain National Forest as a pilot project. Really, this is a continuation of this restoration effort. 95 more nuthatches were released in late August. A portion of the birds were fitted with tiny radio transmitters and are being monitored through MODIS towers. Partnerships were key. Big thanks to U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Missouri River Bird Observatory, Arkansas Game and Fish Commission, and I have to give a shout out to U.S. Forest Service. Much of these restoration efforts occurring in landscapes that they've been managed as an oak pine woodland that is the native habitat of these brown-headed nuthatches. And so again, really, really appreciative of the partnerships here and the opportunity to restore a species that is native to the state. And in closing, a few MDC history notes. On October 1967, the commission approved construction of a warm water hatchery at Blind Pony Lake. On October 1st, 1965, the department hosted an open house at the new headquarters, which is currently undergoing major renovation. And if anybody's been to headquarters, it is a major renovation. And then in October 1952, the commission purchased Duck Creek Conservation Area for $45 an acre. Land's a little more expensive than that. With that, unless you all have any questions for me, that concludes my update.
Commission? Steve?
You mentioned warm water hatcheries at the end of your presentation, and I know we've been super focused on cold water hatcheries. What's the status of our warm water hatcheries? What kind of shape are we in?
So we're in pretty good shape. The team certainly has a list of projects that we need to work through at our warm water hatcheries, but prior to some of the focus on the cold water work, we had done a number of projects. So we've got some things that we still need to work on, continued maintenance and repair sorts of activities. But for the most part, the backlog of construction list on our warm water hatcheries is much shorter than it is on our cold water hatcheries.
should the commission be anticipating any big financial commitment in any of those?
Not that I'm aware of. I think we're in pretty good shape. We've got a project or two that may take some substantial investment, but we'll certainly get you all updated on that prior to any decision being necessary.
Thank you.
Any other questions, Commission? Thank you, Director. And congratulations to all of our staff on those achievements presented in that summary. So next, we will get an update here in the Northwest region from our Administrator, Brian Gregg.
So it's my pleasure to introduce Northwest Regional Administrator Brian Gregg. Brian's been in this role since the initial position was created. He's been a big part of helping lead the region forward, and we're excited to have you, Brian.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director, it's an honor. Good morning. It's an honor to speak with you and to represent Northwest Region this morning. This is us. I hope you enjoyed your stay here, your visit to Northwest Region. We're 19 counties, 2 districts, 4 DCTs, 126 conservation areas, 167 managed waters, and we're going to talk about the rest of the list in the following slides. We have 2 districts, an east and a west, and those we've divided into 2 DCTs each. On the east district, we have the Upper Grand and the Lower Grand, and then on the west district, we have the Les Hills DCT and the Pony Express DCT. These DCTs, each of them are chaired by a district supervisor, and that provides a collaborative and prioritized approach to work planning, and as they develop work plans, which also inform budgets and budget asks and ensure program implementation. Some highlights of our facilities on the region. We have 2 public contact offices, the Northwest Regional Office in St. Joseph and the Chillicothe office here just down the road. Those are our 2 public contact offices. The other highlighted facilities that we have is 4 managed wetlands intensively managed wetlands on the region, and that is Nottoway Valley, Bob Brown, Fountain Grove, where we were yesterday, and Grand Pass. We also have 5 unstaffed shooting ranges. The staff, we have 131 staff at the moment, broken out here in RRM branch, science, CBS, education, and protection. And as you can see from the photographs here, as the collage, we have staff with a wide variety of and range of expertise, working on a variety of diverse projects and work objectives all across the region. And we talk about that work, and one of the focus areas for us is private land management and assistance to private landowners. In FY24, we had over 8,000 site visits, and the LCAP money that was spent was $260,000 roughly. And that's low for us because we generally had some opportunities to use federal programs last year, which brought that number down for state dollars used. It also, we had some projects that didn't get completed, and so we missed kind of some opportunities there for various reasons, weather, contractors, etc. But just to give you an idea, already 1 quarter into the FY25, we've got allocated $430,000 in LCAP work. So getting to our priority geographies and where we're focusing some of our efforts, we have a Tier 1 geography, and that is the Grand River Grasslands. We have 4 COAs in Tier 2, quail restoration landscapes, a priority forest landscape, and 10 priority watersheds. Our crown jewel is the Grand River Grasslands in Harrison County. And this is a partnership between Iowa DNR. As you can see there, the state line is highlighted in red there. It goes into Iowa. That's Ringgold Conservation Area and Kellerton in Iowa on public land. And then for Missouri, we have Pawnee Prairie, Dunn Ranch. This is a partnership with TNC, Iowa DNR, and MDC. TNC has a buffalo herd. That's a picture I took of a bison on Dunn Ranch. And we have prairie chickens up there. We've got ruminant prairies. As you know, prairie, I think we're going to hear some more about prairie in the state later, but prairie is one of the most rare and difficult to restore, habitats that we have in the state. Very precious. And so this area is a grassland area. You can look at the wide open landscapes there in the bison picture and see, where we're at in this part of the state. So this is our crown jewel, and something that we're very excited about that we got going just this year with a partnership between TNC, some federal grants, and some other opportunities. We were able to put a strike team on the ground in Grand River Grasslands. And this strike team, there's other strike teams in the state. This strike team's unique in that it's a partnership with Drake University, TNC, Iowa DNR, and MDC. These are students out of Drake University, and some of the strike teams have had trouble recruiting, just like we do for all the salary positions and things like that. When you're out there kind of canvassing the streets for candidates, it can be kind of difficult. But one very good thing with this strike team is Drake University students that are in environmental science and other majors like that, they have to do some type of work like this. So this provides them a really good opportunity that's right there. I wouldn't say it's easy, but it's there, it's accessible, and it's a very good opportunity for them. So we got several Drake students on board this summer for the first time, and it's really a win-win because students have an opportunity to learn a lot just about habitat management and things like that. And they also get tremendous exposure because they get exposure to TNC. If they want to work in this business in the future, they've got exposure to TNC, Iowa DNR personnel, and MDC personnel. They get mentoring and training. So we have an opportunity. It's a win for us because we get habitat work done on state and private lands. And in addition to that, we also get to see and maybe attract some prospective employees in the future. So if there's such a thing as a win-win-win, this is it. And we're very happy with it. It's just getting started, but we're very excited. As you can see, there are some of the pictures of some of the habitat work they did, woody cover control and prairie areas and ruminants. In Missouri, they're actually capable of working on private land as well. And this strike team is hosted by TNC with some federal grant money, some cooperation with MDC, but they have housing there that's supplied to them. And then they have a crew leader that's very knowledgeable and really a good mentor for them. They're allowed to work on private land, and we have them hooked up with our private land people, with landowners. And the reason we would use them on private land, we have cost share available. We have cost share incentives in the priority geography, but even with that available, contractors can be difficult to find, and folks can't do the work themselves. So if we're really being focused on getting the work done, this is an opportunity where we can bring these staff in and get the habitat work done on private land, and it gives us an opportunity to get that done. So we're very excited about that. Then we move on to our our community conservation strategy. So another focus for us is working with communities, and we've prioritized that work on the region. We have a Tier 1, which is part of St. Joseph, the city of St. Joseph, and we'll get to the breakdown of St. Joseph here in a minute. And then we have a Tier 2, which includes part of St. Joseph, Maryville, Cameron, Bethany, and Chillicothe. Bethany being the closest community to our priority geography of Grand River Grasslands. For the Tier 1, St. Joe's further broken down by demographics and other data that we use to focus on, underserved communities. This is our Tier 1. They have a more concerted and focused effort in the Tier 1 by all staff, all branches, all units in the region. And then when we're out of things to do in Tier 1, we move to Tier 2. Some of the things that we have planned for the community conservation in the Tier 1 just this year is a women's shooting clinic, which we've done before, and it's absolutely filled up every time. It's really amazing how popular that has been, and that was something that somebody in protection thought up and did, and it's just been overwhelming, the response. We have a partners event scheduled for May for all the partners in our Tier 1 and Tier 2 communities. We have an Arbor Day event scheduled in the spring, a native plant workshop scheduled in June, and we have some floating wetland projects that we're working with the city on right now. We also have a outdoor infrastructure grant that we're working with on this with the city of St. Joseph and the Tier 1 community. Moving on to some other highlight projects, the Grand River carp removal. Director Sumner's mentioned that they're expanding that to other bodies of water. The Grand River is one of those areas that they deemed as a possibility to look at commercial fishing on helping us remove some of the carp, how that would affect the native fish, how that would affect the stream, how good it could be, how possible it could be, just a new opportunity, a new project. So in FY23, different branches, units, employees across the region with science leading a lot of the way, we removed 12.5 tons of invasive carp from the Grand River in FY23. And then again, we followed up in FY24 and removed 19.4 tons of invasive carp. And staff from all branches helped with that effort. Our highlight for us is the Poosey Fall Driving Tour. That's something that staff, 30 plus years ago came up with. It's something that we're proud of. It's something that is extremely popular and is growing. Since COVID, we're getting even more numbers every year. It's an opportunity. It's always on the third Sunday in October. This year it was last Sunday, October 20th. It's a driving tour with fall color being the highlight, and we always have a different driving tour. So when you show up, it's a self-guided tour. You get a brochure at the start of it, and if you follow along with the stops, which are numbered, it has write-ups on habitat management, plant ID, all kinds of different educational things that you can read all the way through the tour. You can come. We have everything from Cadillacs to horseback to UTVs, Jeep clubs, wagons, all kinds of folks come through the area, and it's on roads that aren't always open. We prepare them for this tour every year, and they get to drive through them, and it's amazing how popular it is. This year we had 1,460 people come through, and it's an opportunity for us to really engage and inform. It's a huge event. It's very popular. We have staff. Not only do you have the self-guided tour, but we have what we call a demo area about halfway through where people stop. We've got porta potties, etc. We have games for kids. We have staff there answering questions, and we always have something related to the theme for the year to educate folks with. And then we have several other stops along the way where people can get out, and we've got staff there to answer questions and provide, several different topics. So that's one of our highlights. Another highlight project is the Smithville Habitat Day on Smithville Lake. We do this every March. It's a collaboration with the Corps of Engineers and the Clay County Parks. And basically, and we have volunteers come out as well, but basically it's a day where we get together and we use habitat barges and we place brush piles that are collected from the shore with Corps of Engineers property, some rock piles, and we place those, GPS them, and then that GPS information is available to the public after we get them placed for fishermen and others to access. And staff from all branches and units get involved in that project. Some education programs that we're highlighting from this year and the current year and last year. Doing quite a few fishing clinics here. Is pictured a fishing clinic with the Boys and Girls Club with our new EC and Chillicothe, Brad Addison. And then education staff have developed some programs recently that they've been focusing on that are kind of showing folks how they can use more parts of harvested game. And this is a tallow and rawhide workshop where they make lampshades and out of rawhide, really some neat stuff. Various other different little crafts and projects that you can make out of rawhide, and also tallow candles and various other things. Some neat programs. Some other highlighted programs that we have done in the last year. Pictured here is a waterfowl hunting informational exhibit that was set up at Eagle Days. And then on the right is the Grand River Family Fun at YMCA in Chillicothe event. And this event is a yearly event where archery is taught, just general safety is taught, and it's an opportunity to get to know your agent. It's advertised as come out and get to know your agents. It's part of them getting out in the communities and being seen in community conservation. These are our two canine officers on the region, Cedar and Wayland, and they help with investigations and these programs. Talked about the work and some of the highlights of our efforts, and here's some challenges that we're facing and things that we're focused on dealing with, mitigating, etc. CWD discovered first in North Missouri in the state, and so we've been dealing with it since 2010, found in a captive herd in 2010, and it's been part of our lives ever since, sometimes very challenging. Continues to provide challenges as we, do the priority work to manage this disease. The flood of 2019, which was actually two floods, and we witnessed part of the damage yesterday and the restoration of the damage. The Fountain Grove pump station was heavily damaged in those flood events. It was in a vulnerable state when the flood of 19 hit. We're still recovering from the flood of 19, although we've come a long ways. We still have a few projects left to do. One big one was yesterday at the ribbon cutting on the Fountain Grove pump station. Another challenge that we're very focused on, my staff, my leadership team. This picture on the right, we're not carrying a staff person out that has deceased. That is a wildlife, that is a wilderness first aid training. And it just highlighting the fact that we've got a lot of folks with very good talents, skills, knowledge, institutional knowledge, and as we have turnover, folks retire, it's just critical that we hang on to some of this knowledge and experience. It's a focus for my leadership team because, I mean, as leaders, you're often judged on how you can develop people. And so for my leadership, that's my job, is to make sure that we have the proper mentorship, the training, and it's the focus of my leadership team, and it's something that we pay strict attention to. We talk about staff development and training. We're also focused, my leadership team, on staff appreciation and cohesive team building. One of the things that we've done in the last couple of years as an RCT, we've developed into the fiscal year, summertime employee appreciation days, which we're calling ice cream socials. We have ice cream, we get together in fellowship, and we celebrate basically the accomplishments of the prior year. It's an opportunity to get together and just kind of celebrate what we've done and get ready for the coming year. This year, my regional planner did a really good job coming up with some great trivia games and things like that we played. Even people that didn't want to have fun, people like me that needed to loosen up, were laughing, smiling, and having a good time. You can see us here. It's just good fellowship, and I think we're building more cohesive teams. With that, that's your tour, virtual tour of Northwest Region. Any questions?
Thank you, Brian. Commission, any questions for Brian? Steve, microphone.
You mentioned partnerships, Nature Conservancy, and I always think of those being western states and easements and that sort of thing. But what participation does Nature Conservancy do in partnerships?
Okay, so in the Grand River Grasslands, they own, take it back. Just give you a visual. So in the Grand River Grasslands, TNC owns Dunn Ranch, which is down here. They own Pawnee Prairie, and we own a part of Pawnee Prairie. And they've got a facility there that's called Little Creek Farm. And they're doing some work there. I mean, I could talk for hours on what we're doing in this area, but they've got a Little Creek Farm there that they're showing how you can use cattle and grazing and do it in a way that also provides for wildlife habitat, plants, animals, etc. So they're doing research there. They're doing experimentation. They're doing management, and they're also working with private landowners in the area on various different projects, conversion over to warm season grass, and they're assisting them when they're converting over and losing that forage. They have grass banks and things like that. Partnering with us on the strike team, that's one of the things I mentioned. They're housing the strike team. They have a mentor that they have that takes the strike team around and focuses on projects and works with us on which projects to do on TNC, Iowa DNR, and on private land. And so that's essentially the partnership.
Okay, thank you. The other question I had was the private land participation, which is pretty impressive. You alluded to that. We're putting in about $260,000 into that of 8,200 visits, which it's only about $30 a visit. So it looked. But you mentioned some federal cost share stuff. I mean, how many more dollars does that draw into the system?
I would have to get back on you how much we spent in federal programs, but we always try to utilize the federal programs first when we're helping landowners. When a private lands employee goes out and meets with a landowner, they have several tools that they can use. And one of the opportunities are the federal programs. And when we can't utilize one of those for one reason or another, then we go to our state cost share, LCAP.
So then, I guess to understand that of these visits, of 8,200 visits, some of those actually end up being federal cost share programs that get turned into to actually additional monies, correct?
Yes, and those site visits, they can be advice, they can be planning, and they can be signing up for programs. They can be, sometimes it's just a visit. I've been out on private land visits where somebody just wanted to talk, you know, they didn't really have a whole lot of questions. They like to talk to people about conservation, and that's great too.
Thanks, appreciate the presentation.
Yeah, great questions. Yes, Ray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Brian, excellent presentation. Really great to hear about the things going on in the region and take the tour and to spend the day yesterday at the conservation area and to meet so many of the team. And it's clear that you've assembled a great team and that you're a great leader. And I enjoyed hearing about the partnerships with Drake University, TNC, Iowa, the efforts at quail. By the way, send some of those quail back across the state and throughout the state. We would appreciate that. The private land visits that Commissioner Harrison just inquired about, I wonder about that too when I hear that phrase. And you gave me a hint of it, but give a range of just a few examples of what that means. I mean, somebody in their neighborhood trying to grow a few native plants in their backyard to major ranching operations. What is the range of type of visit?
It's all of that you just mentioned. Sometimes it's, I have some forest land, I would like some assistance, what can you offer me? And we have private land foresters that go out. They may see some other things with open lands and say, hey, you need to have somebody that has this expertise. I know enough just to be dangerous, but I need to have them come out. And so sometimes it expands. Maybe they have a creek. It's like we need to get her, or a pond. It's like, you know, our fisheries biologist comes out. Sometimes a lot of our staff are so well versed. I mean, they're a jack of all trades. They know a little bit about everything. So sometimes they don't even have to call out another expert. And sometimes it is, hey, I got a sick tree. Can you come take a look at it and tell me what's wrong with it? Sometimes it's, I'm interested in programs that you have to, I want more quail. I want more turkeys. Can you get me there? And we say, yes, we can. We can help you out with that.
So a constituent would go online and send in a request or make a call, or
They
how
can
do they
call any
know
of
what-
our offices. We'll get them to the right place. We're listed as who's my local contact. We're listed there on our website. And also, we're out at these events talking and answering questions. And a lot of times we get site visits out of those events. Hey, can you come out to my farm? Absolutely, we can.
Great. I think it's an incredible service in addition to all of the publications and education classes and so many other.
It's a focus because so much of the state's private ownership, we have to work there if we're going to move the needle.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Commissioner McHenry?
Just one question, Brian. Again, good presentation. You highlighted a couple examples in Tier 1 and Tier 2 in St. Joe. And since we're in Chillicothe, Tier 2 partnership, I believe, community conservation example, what's going on here?
Anything that we have planned, I'd have to get back on you on
Okay.
that one.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I'd have to get back on.
Okay,
that.
just curious since we're here.
Another thing is we've just recently implemented this community conservation concept. We've worked with communities for years, but we're
Sure.
just more focused on where we're more proactive. I know we have a lot of things going on, and even though I know a lot about what's going on, I don't know everything. It's
Okay.
hard to keep track of it all. But I do know, like in Bethany, there's a hospital being built. We're working with them on the design. They're building a lake. We're working with them on some things they can do with that. So we have a lot going on.
Okay, well, you know, you have a lot of knowledge, and we appreciate what you share with us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian, so much. Before we transition, I just want to share, and Commissioner Wagner alluded to it, how wonderful it is for us to be out in the field and in the Northwest region. The project at Fountain Grove predates my service on the commission, and I know it took a lot of staff energy and effort to get it across the finish line. And I think that also highlights the thread of continuity between commissioners serving on the commission. And we have a great guest with us this morning, and that is Commissioner Emeritus Jeff Churn from the Northwest region. and a big advocate of Fountain Grove and how it's another jewel here in our Northwest region. Jeff, thank you so much for spending the time with us. It has been insightful and entertaining. So thank you very much for sharing your experience as a commissioner. It is truly a unique opportunity that we have to serve our state. So thank you. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we do have our consent calendar. Commissioners, any items you wish to be removed or taken up separately?
No, I do not have anything.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And the consent calendar is approved. All right, this morning we have a special guest with us. We have Brian Canaday here to kick us off with the regulations report.
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, and Director Sumners. It's my pleasure to have the opportunity to present the regulations report in the absence of Deputy Conley. I know she regrets that she couldn't be here. She has a wonderful leadership opportunity with some very special training that I've had the opportunity to be at with the National Conservation Leadership Institute. So she sends her regrets, but she'll come back ready to continue to excel in her role. So I've been asked to provide the Regulations Committee report this time for the Commission, and it's fortunately rather brief. So I'm very happy with that. So with that, the Regulations Committee did meet on August 29th, and there were no action items as a part of that committee, as a part of that meeting and report. But the committee members were provided brief updates on several ongoing regulations topics and discussed possible future regulations topics. Additionally, the committee requested updates at future Regulations Committee meetings on previously approved regulation changes, such as the use of drones for recovering wounded game. While there were no new regulations proposals, the proposals from the mid-year code review initially approved at your September meeting are currently open for public comment. The 30-day official comment period runs from October 16 through November 14. As of Wednesday morning, the 23rd, this past Wednesday morning, no comments had been received by the department. No public comments had been received. A summary of all the comments that were received on any of the open proposals have been provided in the final orders of rulemaking for consideration in December. Commissioner, all citizen correspondence received since the last report are summarized in the current report on page 1. Madam Chair, unless there are any questions or comments, this concludes the Regulations Committee report.
Commission? You may proceed.
All right, thank you. At this time, I would like to invite our Served Program Supervisor, Jason Isbell, to the podium for an update on Missouri's Deer Management Plan. As a brief introduction, Jason holds a bachelor's degree in environmental and forestry and forest biology from the State University of New York and a master's degree in forestry and wildlife management from Stephen F. Austin State University in Texas. In 2010, Jason joined the department as our state's turkey and ruffed grouse biologist. During the spring of 2019, Jason was promoted to his current role as the Served Program Supervisor, where he oversees management of Missouri's deer and elk. Jason, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Brian. Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the Commission. It's a pleasure to be here this morning to provide an update about our deer management plan. It's been a bit of a long road. We started this process about a year ago as our internal whitetail deer working group met, reviewed the old plan, started to think about what goals, objectives we want to keep from the former plan and what additions we might want to make, and started down that path. We had a first draft of the plan early in 2024. During the summer, we met with key partners to get their input on the draft goals and objectives, and that was prior to a public engagement strategy that took place this past summer, where we provided the public with opportunity to comment on the draft plan goals and objectives, in addition to conducting a survey of about 70,000 deer hunters. I've incorporated all that feedback into the plan and sent it out for a final review for our staff, and so it feels good to be wrapping up the 10-year deer plan. Before I get into the outline, just wanted to say a few thank yous as well. My staff members, Aaron Hildreth, Ashley McCullough, my former staff member, Kevin Wiskirkin, who's still with the agency, no longer in my program, served as very helpful members of our team as we began crafting this project. Also want to thank Deb Hudman, our Wildlife Health Program Supervisor, certainly our members of our Whitetail Deer Working Group, and then the rest of our staff that are involved in revision of the plan and all of their efforts involved with managing our whitetail deer population. So a brief outline of what I'm going to cover this morning. I'll just have a couple brief slides about just management of Missouri's deer population in general before we transition into talking about the management plan update. Then I'll cover the results of the survey that I just mentioned that was conducted this summer. And then we'll transition into evaluation of current status of the population, status of CWD, and future regulatory considerations. So I know it goes without saying to this group, but whitetails are certainly a cherished natural resource of our state, an iconic species. We have just under 500,000 people that pursue whitetails in our state annually. They generate over $1.5 billion to our economy annually and support over 13,000 jobs. If we look at deer management, it's a rather complex process that involves a suite of biological and social considerations. So we know whitetails are a keystone species. When overabundant, they can certainly have some adverse impacts to the landscape, to other wildlife species, so it's really important that we manage them within what we would call biological carrying capacity. Other considerations would be diseases like chronic wasting disease that we know poses a very significant threat to the long-term viability of our population. Then we have a whole suite of social considerations. We, as I mentioned, have about 480,000 deer hunters, agricultural producers, other stakeholders, folks that drive Missouri's roadways that have other personal property that can be damaged by deer if they're overabundant. And so we've got this broad suite of biological considerations that we have to take into account. And of course, I have to take into account the social considerations as well, which are as equally important. So some of the key aspects of deer management in Missouri, certainly maintaining a biologically balanced population. We already talked about biological carrying capacity and our need to manage our deer population so they do not have adverse effects on other wildlife species, but also maintaining socially acceptable deer numbers too, which is very important. Of course, providing recreational opportunities for folks, whether that be consumptive or non-consumptive, whether they enjoy deer hunting or simply like to enjoy observing whitetails. And then minimizing human-deer conflicts and certainly the potential that deer have to cause adverse effects to our natural communities if they are overabundant. And so how do we do that? Certainly scientific expertise and teamwork. Myself and my team, our Wildlife Health Program, our Whitetail Deer Working Group, keeping up with the literature, collaborating with other folks in other regions of the state to make sure that we're aware of the latest research and the latest management tools as we manage our whitetail population now and into the future. Research, seeking funding to conduct research projects if we have questions that we need answered to help us manage the resource. And then public input is vitally important to the management of whitetail deer in Missouri. We survey thousands of hunters every year to get their opinions on regulations, seasons, deer abundance. We also survey thousands of producers every year to get their opinions on deer numbers in the areas that they operate their farms. We get a wide range of public input throughout the year, and a lot of the regulations and seasons we have and the approach that we take to management is impacted greatly by the input that we get from members of the public. Since our last deer management plan was written a decade ago, there's certainly some pretty significant challenges, and we've seen some changes on the landscape that will impact how we manage whitetail populations in the future. So certainly the distribution of chronic wasting disease has changed considerably in the last 10 years. Thankfully, the infection rates or the prevalence rates of our whitetail population continue to be very low, and so we continue to make significant progress at slowing the spread and protecting our whitetail herd. We know we have fewer deer hunters than we did. Our peak year was 2013. We had about 517,000 deer hunters. Now we have about 480. And so that makes it challenging. Not only do we have fewer people out there enjoying the opportunity, but in terms of managing our whitetail population, we know we harvest last year 326,000, a few years prior to that in the ballpark of 300,000. That provides a great service to our natural communities and the citizens of our state by keeping that population biologically and socially balanced. And so that certainly presents a big challenge when we look at the fact that we have fewer deer hunters out there than we have previously. And then we've seen changing hunter preferences as more folks are interested in harvesting antler deer than they were in the past. Obviously, harvest. So that presents to the future and think about what tools we might need to manage our deer population so it exists at desired levels. Next, 5 slides, I'm going to cover each goal of the deer management plan, and then at a high level, cover some of the objectives as we look at operationalizing our plan and the work that lies ahead for us. So our first goal is deer population management, using scientific management of our whitetail population to ensure that we are within biological and social carrying capacities. And so obviously monitoring the status and trends of our whitetail population is a significant part of what we do. We're actively engaged in a research project to develop some new population models to help us do that. Taking a look at our regulations, the way our seasons are structured, using data from hunter surveys to ensure that we have the tools that we need to manage our deer population, but that our regulations aren't overly complicated and burdensome to our hunters, which we know can impact participation rates. Evaluating the effectiveness of deer management tools and strategies in urban and suburban communities, which of course are very challenging places to manage deer populations. And then it goes back to the slide that I just covered in terms of changing hunter preferences. Evaluating options to increase antlerless deer harvest in portions of the state where we need to increase deer harvest. So, as you're aware, commissioners, over the last several years, we've liberalized our deer seasons. We have higher firearms antlerless permit numbers than we've had previously. We have more options for hunters, more days in the field, and in some portions of our state, despite that increase in opportunity, we're still not harvesting enough antlerless deer. So, starting to look to the future and say, what other tools might we need in order to be able to keep our population at desired levels? Our second goal is hunting and recreation, providing opportunity for folks to go out and enjoy whitetails, whether that be during hunting season or whether that be viewing whitetails at other times of the year. Evaluating our seasons and regulations. I already talked about regulatory complexity, but using information that we can get from hunters to ensure that we're allocating opportunity fair and equitably among the various seasons, methods, and permits. Continue to promote recreational deer hunting as the primary tool that we use to manage our whitetail deer population, and continue to promote and support the Share the Harvest program. That's a great program for hunters to donate venison to those that need it. It's certainly a win-win program, and it's increasingly important as we have near-record deer population levels. We have an abundance of opportunity for our hunters. We have fewer hunters on the landscape, and so that program is going to continue to be vitally important, not only to provide venison for those that need it, but an outlet for the deer, for those hunters that we're asking to shoot more deer, but that one or two deer may satisfy them. But if they're interested in harvesting more, providing them that outlet for that venison. Our third goal is deer health and disease, maintaining a healthy deer population and minimizing the threats of CWD and other diseases. Thankfully, as I mentioned, CWD remains rare in our state. Prevalence rates are still very low. As for example, last year of all the positive counties that we had, more than 90% of them had less than 2% of the deer in those counties test positive. So it continues to exist at low levels, which I attribute to our surveillance and management efforts. We have a robust surveillance effort. By sampling the number of deer that we do, it allows us to detect the disease early where it exists. And through localized and broad-scale management tools like targeted removal allows us to slow the spread as much as we can to protect our deer population. In the future, it'll be important that we continue to work with our partners for our CWD surveillance efforts. Mandatory sampling gets a lot of press, but a lot of folks don't recognize that we work with over 140 partners across the state, taxidermists and meat processors, to collect a lot of samples, and that's a really important part of our surveillance effort too. So continuing to work with those partners, continuing to work really diligently to meet our surveillance goals in all counties of the state. And then continuing to conduct both broad-scale and localized CWD management. We have a number of regulations that are in place at broad scales within the CWD management zone, but within the CWD core areas close to where CWD is found, of course, we do targeted removal, and we have CWD management permits that can be used during deer season. But we know that we're going to continue to need to adapt as the status of the disease changes, and so we're going to have to adhere to the successes that we've had, but also recognize that as the distribution of the disease changes, we need to adapt to that distribution, recognizing that we need to be working where we stand the greatest chances of success. And also trying some new strategies too. One of those this year, we have a CWD Hunter Harvest Initiative, which is a pilot effort in 4 of our CWD core areas where we've provided landowners with a goal for the number of deer to harvest during deer season. And if they're able to hit that goal in those 4 pilot core areas, then targeted removal will not occur in those core areas this winter. And so that was an effort visiting with staff and landowners that wanted more opportunity to be able to try to work toward those goals during the deer hunting season rather than after deer season. So this is one example that I wanted to highlight of how we're trying to adapt to the changing status and trying to engage hunters and allow them to be part of the solution and working towards that goal during the deer season. So we're interested to find out how that effort will work this year. Our fourth goal is education, communication, and public engagement, recognizing the need and the importance of communicating about chronic wasting disease, specifically in addition to the other communication that we do about deer in general and deer hunting and deer management. There's a lot of information, misinformation about CWD that exists, and that causes confusion among our stakeholders. So making sure that we're out in the forefront of communicating about the disease, the threat that it poses to our whitetail population, and why we're taking the steps that we are to manage the disease to protect the herd. Ensure stakeholders are engaged in deer management decisions. When I started this talk, I talked about the public engagement strategy for deer management, providing an opportunity for folks to review the goals and objectives. I've already talked about the surveys that we do, that we use that information to help us manage the population, establish regulations. So continuing to engage those stakeholders along the way, continuing to do the various surveys that we do annually to help us make decisions. And then just in general, ensuring that we're meeting their demand for information, whether that's just about deer ecology, deer hunting, or deer management, just making sure that we're providing that information for them. And then lastly, just looking for opportunities for the public to contribute to management efforts. One of those examples would be our bow hunter observation survey, which is a voluntary survey that archers can participate in. They record the county they hunt in, how much time they spend, and what wildlife they see, deer, turkeys, fur bearers, and then we use that information to track population trends. So that represents an active way that they can collect data that we will use. Many folks really love that opportunity. They've been doing it for decades, and so looking for other ways that we can engage them in that manner. And then lastly, research, conducting research to help us manage our whitetail population. Lately, we've had a lot of focus on CWD research. That'll continue to be a priority of the program, but just working annually to prioritize our research objectives. What are the questions that we have, and then trying to use research to help answer those questions. And then the heavy lift that's in front of us right now is operationalizing the plan. Test. All right. We'll continue. Operationalizing the plan. So this plan is a strategic plan. So it provides a 10-year framework for deer management. It does not get down into specific work objectives that would translate to the work that we do on the ground. It provides the framework. So now the task will begin to take the goals, objectives, and strategies, operationalize them, look at our work plans, and actually put those into action. So that work is going to be starting very soon. Also recognizing that we're going to have to be adaptable, right? The last plan was 10 years, but if you look at the goals, objectives, and strategies that were put in that plan compared to the work that we're doing now, clearly we've evolved during that 10-year period. And so that'll continue to be really important. If we make substantial changes to our approach in the next 10 years, we're going to have to update the plan, provide some additional content as we do that, recognizing that the plan is not a static document, it's a living document. So during the process of the deer management plan revision, I mentioned already regulatory complexity and the status of CWD. So as we began and continue to revise our plan, we discussed considerations that were associated with the deer seasons, our regulations, and the potential complexity, and also the expansion of the management zone, particularly in the last couple years, and desire to get more information from hunters about their values and their opinions about our regulations, our seasons, the way we manage the population, CWD and CWD management. And so as I mentioned previously, we conducted a survey of about 70,000 deer hunters this summer. Results of that effort will help to inform communication with stakeholders moving forward and also regulation considerations moving forward. So I've got a series of slides coming up where I'm going to highlight just some of the results from that survey. Got question tables coming up, but I'll try to highlight the most important parts of each table as we move through. So this question deals with, we asked hunters, do our seasons, bag limits, and hunting regulations allow you to achieve your deer management goals? We had just over 3/4 of our hunters that agreed that they did. And it was also reassuring to know that it didn't matter whether the person hunted in the management zone or outside the CWD management zone. Really, that if you look at that percentage, right around 3/4 of our hunters. So whether or not they were in the zone or out of the zone, they agreed that 3/4 of them that our season's bag limits and regulations allowed them to meet their deer management goals. We also ask about regulatory complexity. So we have 4 different response options there on the left side of the table. We had over 3/4 of our hunters agreed that the structure of our season was easy to understand. 73% agreed that it was easy to determine how they could fill antlerless permits. We had just about 2/3 agreed that it was easy to determine which county they could fill those permits in. So that was encouraging. We did have hunters that were pretty equally split when we asked them, do they feel there are too many portions of firearms deer season, with about 1/3 agreeing, 1/3 disagreeing, and about 1/3 neither agreeing nor disagreeing. We wanted to get some insight into what their approach was in terms of harvesting antlered bucks. And so we asked them, what is your approach when it comes to harvesting antlered bucks during the deer season? We had about 25% of them that hunt and shoot the first legal buck that presents an opportunity, about 40% that said they primarily hunt for large antlered bucks but would shoot a smaller antlered buck if it was late in the season or if an opportunity presented itself earlier in the season, and then just under 1/3 that said they hunt and shoot large antlered bucks exclusively. That was pretty consistent throughout the various regions of the state, except for up here in Northwest and to the east and the Northeast region, not surprisingly, where it was just under half of the hunters in these 2 regions hunt for and only shoot large antlered bucks. Next, we wanted to get at what do hunters value most, and so we had a wide range of response options that you can see on the left-hand side of the table, and I've ordered this table in order of highest percentage, extremely or very important, down to the lowest percentage. So the highest 3 things that our hunters valued were having a healthy deer population, seeing the tradition of deer hunting passed down to future generations, and seeing deer while they were out there hunting. Next, having enough deer to provide an adequate harvest opportunity, having fair and equitable allocation of that hunting opportunity, and hunting with friends and family. And at the bottom, harvesting a deer to provide food, seeing deer throughout the year when they're not hunting, having a deer population with large antlered bucks, and harvesting a deer. We have a few questions in regard to CWD. And so we asked folks to indicate the extent at which they agreed or disagreed with the following statements that you see on the left side of the table. Over 3/4 of our hunters felt like MDC should try to slow the spread of CWD, and about 77% of hunters felt that there was their responsibility to help slow the spread of CWD. About 70% of hunters felt CWD poses a significant threat to our deer population. Just under 70% felt hunters can help slow the spread of CWD, and 64% trusted MDC to make good decisions in the future about CWD management. We also have another question about CWD. How concerned that are you that CWD will, and then you see the response options on the left. Over 80% were concerned that CWD would affect the quality of deer hunting, and at least 80% felt like CWD could negatively affect the health of the deer population in our state, could cause population declines if not managed, and could continue to spread within the deer population. As you're aware, commissioners, within the CWD management zone, we have a unique set of regulations that are designed to help slow the spread of CWD. Counties in the management zone are eligible for mandatory sampling during opening weekend of the November portion. We also have the CWD portion of firearms deer season, which gives extra hunting opportunity. We also have carcass movement restrictions. We rescind the antler point restriction in the management zone counties if it was in place in the county before it was added to the zone. And there's, of course, a prohibition on the placement of feed and minerals. So we wanted to get hunter opinions on these regulations that are tied to the management zone as to whether they support or oppose them. We see that we had considerably more support than opposition for mandatory sampling, for more days of firearms deer hunting opportunity, for carcass movement restrictions. And then when it came to rescinding the antler point restriction and the prohibition on feed and minerals, hunters were about equally split on whether they supported or opposed those 2 regulations. So a brief summary of the survey. Again, those are just some of the highlights of the survey, but wanted to summarize those and the key take-homes from that research, for that research effort, that survey, at least in my opinion. So our seasons of bag limits and regulations are allowing our hunters, most hunters, to meet their deer management goals throughout the state, whether they hunt in a management zone county or not. Of all of the different value options that we provided them, the highest rank were having a healthy deer population, seeing the tradition of hunting passed down, and seeing deer while hunting. I will note that what I took away from the survey in large part was that the values of our hunters aligned very well with the goals that we have in our deer management plan. And that was very encouraging to see. Most hunters agreed that CWD poses a significant threat to our deer population. They agreed that we should try to slow the spread of the disease. They felt like they were part of the solution and also felt like it was their responsibility, at least for most of the respondents, to help slow the spread of CWD. In terms of regulations within the management zone, as I just mentioned, there was considerably more support than opposition for mandatory sampling, more days of firearms deer hunting opportunity, and carcass movement restrictions. And then hunters were about equally split in terms of their support or opposition for the feeding and mineral ban and removal of the antler point restriction. So although the values of most of our hunters align very well with the goals, and we have the shared goal of having a healthy deer population, at least with those two regulations, there was just differences of opinion in more hunters than the other options for the tools that we need to accomplish that goal. So our plan for the coming year is to engage stakeholders this year and in 2025 to provide information about the deer management plan, build awareness and understanding of our current approach to CWD management and the regulations that we have in place during deer season, and the other management strategies that we have, like target removal that occurs outside the deer hunting season. And then use that to help inform and create awareness of regulatory considerations in the future to help us meet our deer management goals. And then the last slide I have a little bit of a pivot, but regulation considerations for next year's deer season. So at next week's regulations committee meeting, we will be discussing a consideration for rescinding the carcass transport regulations that are currently in place and instead establishing carcass disposal regulations, with the expansion of the CWD management zone and our carcass movement restrictions impacting more and more hunters. This recommendation that will come to the regulations committee was a desire to make things simpler for hunters, easier to understand, hopefully making things simpler for the hunters while also helping us achieve our goal of minimizing the spread of CWD. We will be discussing that with you commissioners in December, and then additional opportunities are being discussed for ways to simplify our regulations as part of the revision of our deer management plan, and we'll be bringing that to you and discussing that in May of 2025 when we bring the bulk of our deer packet and deer regulations recommendations for 2025. That concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions if you have any.
Yeah, Jason. Jason, oh, that's better. Great presentation in our ongoing discussion about deer management. I'm sure we have questions, so commissioners. I can ask my question first, not my preference, but I will. So Jason, what do we know as far as deer harvested on public versus private land?
Yeah, it's highly variable depending on the particular tract. I mean, most deer, of course, are harvested on private land. On some of our conservation areas, particularly the smaller ones, and particularly those in the northern part of our state, tend to get more pressure than other areas, and harvest tends to be a bit higher. We get down in the southern part of the state where you've got larger tracts of Forest Service ground and bigger acreages. They certainly attract a lot of attention, but you've just got a lot more area for hunters to spread out in. So I would say it's highly variable. We don't know, as hunters telecheck their deer, of course, they indicate private versus public, but pinning that down to an individual area is difficult. We do have cards on our conservation areas where we ask hunters to fill out the card as they leave, what they saw and what they harvested, but it's, in terms of what compliance we get, it's not a regulation and code that they fill that out. So it's really hard to get a handle specifically on harvest on individual areas, but I think to summarize it, it's pretty highly variable. It depends on the size of the area and where it is in the state.
One other question I had, and you presented a lot of information. We've talked about deer management and CWD a lot. Specifically, and I was showing you pictures that my household is already out deer hunting, but we do have opening weekend coming up. If I could give you an opportunity to share some takeaways, and specifically toward hunters as we enter opening weekend, of considerations to make in regards to CWD.
Yeah, so today, in terms of opening weekend, of course, there's the requirement for mandatory sampling. So we got 43 of the 70 counties where folks are required on the day of harvest to take their deer in. So especially folks need to be especially mindful of what county they're hunting in. It used to be when our zone was smaller, any zone in the county was a mandatory sampling county, and now that we have more counties in the zone that we can sample, there's been a little bit of shuffling over the last several years as we've had to prioritize the counties and rank them in terms of highest to lowest risk. So hunters have had to be more mindful of paying attention to the regs booklet and making sure that their county is in, because just because it was in last year doesn't necessarily mean it was, and vice versa. We've also had a number of new counties added to the zone in the last couple of years, and so we've got mandatory sampling in a lot of new counties. And so folks certainly need to be aware of that. And then just in general, just the regulations, obviously in general, but more specifically tied to CWD management zone, just being aware with these new counties coming in the zone that the carcass movement restrictions apply, the regulations that we just spoke about, the feeding ban, the antler point restriction, all of those different regulation changes that take place as a county comes into the zone.
Commissioner?
I have a comment, Jason, and a question. First the comment, and I've shared this with the director and some others on the team, but I picked up some comments about the Share the Harvest program, and obviously it's a very important program, but with the pressures of CWD, the payments back to the processors, the requirements relating to separating deer meat from other meat that they might be processing and cleansing and so on and so forth, I think that maybe is going to continue to grow to be a burden on processors, which may constrain that program across the state. And so I know you have perhaps received the feedback of those comments, and look forward to talking about that in the future. That was my comment. My question really relates to, in the survey and on your presentation, and Commissioner Chairman Eckelkamp just alluded to hunters' plans and going out and managing and shooting, hunting deer in CWD and public lands and private lands. If there is an individual who says, I'm going to go hunt with my son or daughter or my brother, it's a bit overwhelming, I think, for a non-hunter or somebody who hunted years ago to step into hunting. What is a CWD zone? What licenses do I need? How do I count antlers? How can I field dress the deer? What does it mean to have it mandatory tested? What's the easiest way for an uninformed, somebody who aspires to go out in the woods, even to where they go, where they learn public lands? And we could spend all day on this, and there are classes that are taught on this, but in a nutshell, to give hunters who may be watching this meeting online, a 30-second primer on where to go.
Sure.
To have a successful hunt.
Sure, good question. And so certainly for new hunters going through Hunter Ed, they're going to learn a lot of information there. Our various branches hold events throughout the state for new hunters to try to educate them on what they need to be aware of. Our regulations booklet, our website has a lot of information. But it is a challenge. I mean, if you think about somebody who's brand new and they take a look at the fall deer and turkey booklet, I can understand how it would be intimidating. And I will say that our relevancy branch conducted a project on code complexity that's going to be helpful as we revise the deer plan. As I mentioned in the presentation, complexity of regulations is one of the areas we want to take a look at. So I will say that there are a variety of outlets to get that information, but we do acknowledge that complexity can be a real barrier. And so trying to look at our regulations, making sure that we still have the tools that we need to have, but are there ways that we can make it less for those especially that are new to it?
Well, thank you. I agree, and like the private land assistance that I talked about a little while ago, I suppose that would-be hunter can simply call their local office and get some guidance as well.
Yeah, we're always happy to talk to
Look, excuse me. Thank you, Jason. Good presentation. Looking at your slides, and a couple of them just kind of caught my attention. Comparing it to, I know you have the 5 goals that you listed early on, from population management to sport and recreation components, health of the deer, obviously, CWD, education and research. Now, I look at those 5 goals, and I look at the importance of each of the things on your slide related to the survey. Is there a correlation between those at all? I'm just trying to think of, is there a hierarchy on the 5 goals? Because I look at the importance, you see a lot of that related to whether it's the health of the deer, or it's hunting with friends and family, or following a tradition. Is there a correlation there at all and how you look at those goals in relationship to what the survey tells you? No, that's okay.
Could possibly have in the value.
Mhm.
The status of the population, our management efforts in general, our regulations. They're all kind of woven in, you know, in terms of opportunity pursue deer, the complexity, the equal allocation of hunting opportunity would all nest under goal 2, having a population where I'm able to see deer when I'm out there on the landscape, minimizing the effects of CWD would be goals 1 and 3 respectively. So we did try to take the overall structure of how those goals existed within the draft plan and then break that down into the questions that we asked.
So does the survey then help you establish your goals?
broad. So it was unlikely, and I didn't expect to have anything from the survey that would cause us to change the goals, because those are really high level. But certainly within those are objectives, and those, that was my fault this time. Certainly within the goals, they're the high level, and then you've got the objectives, and then you've got the strategies or tasks. And so as we got information from the survey and the public comment opportunity, those definitely did influence those. So we had the draft as we're going in on the front end. We had the public comments that were coming in through the public side. Then we had the survey of our hunters, and we used both of those, and those resulted in changing of some of the objectives and strategies, and sometimes adding some additional ones.
Well, and since it's a 10-year plan, I assume some of the survey information you receive now would be different than when you would have got 10 years ago,
Absolutely,
which would then correlate to then what the goals might be today.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Harrison?
Turn me, okay. Obviously, I have a lot of questions, and we visit a lot, Jason. So I'm going to kind of summarize a couple things. First off, you know, it's a public meeting, so I'm sure we have people outside that are listening to what we're talking about today. And I pay attention to social media. Social media can be very positive. It can actually be very negative, because you get one person that's out on the outskirts, and they can put something on social media, and they don't have to support it. They just put it, and there will be people that cling to it. I would encourage people like the Missouri Bow Hunter Association, Missouri Whitetail Association, when you see something posted on social media, particularly if it gets your attention, positive or negative, look for evidence-based information that supports or doesn't support it. And if you have questions that strikes you wrong, I mean, there's a wealth of resource within the department. You guys respond well. And rather than try to exploit that and move it forward, you know, go get the evidence-based information. You know, in my educational background, that's what I look for. That's the first thing. The second thing, some things about surveys that I think we need to be very attentive to is that, in general, your human nature is if you get over 50%, then the decision you're doing is the right one. And it discounts that the other 40% may feel differently, okay? You know, we're getting ready to go into a big election cycle, and, you know, it's probably going to be within a few percentage points. And whoever wins, then the rest of the people don't matter anymore. And I think that's one thing that's very dangerous about surveys when you look at them. There's 3 things on the surveys that really got my attention. And I'm going to kind of summarize this back a little bit. You know, we've got 2 really big issues that we're addressing in this 10-year plan. One is the CWD thing. I'm going to talk about it in a minute. But the other one is the deer management population problem. And that's probably a bigger problem. You know, when you look at the big deal, I drove from my house in Raleigh to Springfield on Monday morning, and I found 27 dead deer on the interstate. It's crazy, you know, as far as that population problem. And, you know, psychologically, you know, since I've been on the commission, we've added multiple opportunities to harvest does. And if you look at some of the studies, when you start adding multiple opportunities, you actually tend to decrease participation in the long run. And you have quite a challenge there. And I don't have any answers for you. It's that simple. but I think that's a big deal. But I would encourage the public that as we look at this 10-year plan and we're working towards that, that this is your opportunity to be actively involved. And the department is responsive to it. And we really need to appreciate that and respect it. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that survey. There was 3 areas there that got my attention. One is that 64% of the people trusted our approach for CWD management. And correct me if I'm wrong, but typically when we look at surveys that have trust in CWD, the percentage is significantly higher than that. And, you know, I think that probably leads back to social media and some of the more influential social influencers that think CWD is a bunch of bull. I'm going to talk about that in a minute because they're wrong. The other one, this hunter desire, you know, I've been a deer hunter for 50 years, and when I was a kid, if you could kill something with brown hair on it, it's a good deal. Yeah, I have 10-year-old kids that they're looking for a trophy buck, and they pass multiple bucks, and I'm completely dumbfounded by it, you know. And so the culture of what we want to do and what we need done is 2 different paths. You know, I mean, in northern Missouri, 50% of the hunters only want to kill a mature buck. That means they're not helping us with it. And I talked to Thomas. I know he's back in the back. I think he is, and we had a very enlightening conversation. But that's really a challenge on this deer management population thing. And so, touch on that. CWD. I want to talk about the positives first, and I want to address some of the things that the public really needs to get their head out of the sand on. Okay? If you look at all the adjacent states, every adjacent state we have, Missouri is taking the most proactive approach on CWD management, and we've been able to maintain the lowest incidence of CWD. Okay? And I just give you some numbers here. Hunter harvested 0.4% of bucks were positive, 0.1% of does, and our targeted culling. I'm going to use that word, but I'm going to change it in a minute. But targeted culling, bucks 2.5% incidence, does 0.8% incidence. Okay. The reason I point that out, I'm going to use an example that, in my opinion, is an example of what we don't want to do, and we can learn from it. What happened in Wisconsin? When they first had positive CWD, they took the nuclear approach. And then, next thing you know, they got legislature involved in it, they got the governor involved in it, and now they're looking at 20 to 50% incidence because the DNR created such a problem that they just stopped everything. And now they've got a disaster. You look at Kansas, same thing. And so the approach that you're taking from a scientific, evidence-based standpoint is extremely valid. And the public that get on social media and say that CWD isn't real, they better get their head out of the sand, because it is. That's possible. Okay? Criticism. Okay? And Thomas, thank you again. I know you're back there, and I want to visit. But the biggest criticisms I hear is our targeted culling program. And the term culling means that you're getting rid of inferior animals. I'm a cattle producer. You're not getting rid of inferior animals. It's a targeted population management program. That's the first thing. And I think we need to educate the public on what we're doing, but the public perception is that we take the nuclear approach and we go in and we try to kill every deer in the area. Quite frankly, that's not true. Again, Thomas, I keep coming back to you. I kept you for an hour last night, and if the public had any idea the conversations that go on outside of this room in our management decisions, they'd get a true appreciation for just how sincere everybody is in trying to make the best decisions. We need to do a better job on educating our public that when we do a target population management program, we're not trying to kill every deer on the landscape. That's not the point of it. And if I'm going to criticize the program just from a landowner standpoint, One that puts a deer stand on your property line, that means they're hunting your property. Well, many people try to capitalize on people that are trying very hard to manage their property. And if we take the approach of someone that's done super quality deer management for 20 years and we think it's a success that we can get access to an adjacent property, we need to think about that approach, because there needs to be everybody involved in that, because you can isolate some of your most advocate deer managers in the state. And so you need to be conscientious of not only getting access, but the impact that it has. And the reason I say that as a landowner, I have a lot of land that's adjacent to row crop farmers, and although landowners are our best deer managers, a true row crop farmer that's in to make money, they wish there was zero deer. And so they quickly grant access because it takes away from their bottom line. And that's, something that you get access to. I told you this when we were visiting last night. I had an outfitter that leased row crop ground adjacent to my very best hunting property. And he drew and killed 22 of my mature bucks off from it by leaving a 10-acre food plot. And you think that set very well with me. Well, see, we could potentially be perceived in our targeted population management programs that's a criticism. And Thomas, when I talk to you, your approach to it from a manager's, I know you're in charge of this, is very healthy. And if we were educating our public of what we're doing there, I think it would be incredibly helpful to us. Because of what I see and what people publish on social media, I would be hard-pressed to allow MDC to do that on my property. And I hope you appreciate the position that puts me as a commissioner, because I'm trying to support this, but then I don't know for sure if I support it. And again, being able to visit with Thomas, and I keep coming back to you, that was probably one of the more enlightening conversations I've had in 2 years related to that topic, getting to talk to somebody that really does it. And it's very helpful. All right. That's a comment on culling. The other supplemental feeding, that's a question for Kyle, actually. Okay. As in Bass Pro Shop, man, there's like a whole aisle of all this product there. And you're like, if you think, and you go to every farm store, they're selling corn. You go to Academy Sports, so we have this reg in place, but nobody's doing that. And I think we're supposed to evaluate a financial impact that's more than $500, and it's probably a multi-million-dollar impact of having that in place. One thing I'd like to ask you, I talked to Grant Woods last night for a long time, and I'd like to see some evidence-based information that supports prion density, and I think there is out there. And I think it would be really helpful for us to get that on our website, to make it available to the public to see it. I haven't been able to find it, and actually Grant gave me some information, a contact person in Wisconsin. I'm anxious to read some of that, because we need to have evidence-based information that supports that recommendation. And I think it would be helpful, but I think we need to be doing a better job of educating the public. There's people are smart. They read and or try to be thorough. Evidence-based information is golden in helping us. And I really, I hope everybody appreciates how much work Jason put into that presentation. There is a lot of information there. And I sincerely appreciate the work. You're a very special guy, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I've jotted down a few notes, Commissioner Harrison, based on your comments that I just wanted to respond to. In terms of the surveys, you made a good point initially in terms of a support or opposition and how much the magnitude of difference is. And I think we certainly recognize that. And I think in cases where you have, say, 60-40 versus a 90-10, when I look at when I look at like a 60-40 split, that impacts our communication efforts greatly, because we know we have, even though the majority in that particular case, we're talking about hypothetical example, supports it, we know we've got a reasonably high percentage of folks that feel in opposition. And so in those cases, if that were a regulation change that we were going to move forward with, we would know that in terms of our communication efforts and our outreach, we would want to approach that differently to build awareness and understanding of the importance of the change. So I wanted to mention that. In terms of target removal, yeah, it's certainly a controversial practice. When we hear from a lot of folks that don't support the effort, but it's been encouraging. In this survey and a survey we conducted a couple of years ago, we have more than twice the number of folks that support our target removal efforts and oppose them. And we've conducted surveys of folks at a statewide scale, and even within CWD core areas, in both cases, we still have more than twice the number of respondents to those surveys that support than oppose it. So that's encouraging, because often you'll hear from folks that will have negative feelings about it and not as much from those that support it. So it's reassuring to know that we've still got a really strong base that supports our efforts. And to your point, and in conversation with Thomas, recognizing the subtle balance of working with those landowners and recognizing that in some cases when you get access, it's for a certain number of deer, or it may be antlerless only, or it may be 5, or it may be 10. In some cases, it could be higher, but recognizing that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach, that we have to work with the landowners and clearly meet their needs and their desires, and recognizing that if we're going to be successful, we're going to have to be flexible in that nature. And I also think I'll go back to the Hunter Harvest Initiative. I see that as a way for us to have listened to some of the comments that we get from some folks that aren't supportive of the efforts, that would want to take more control during the hunting season and harvest additional deer, to where if that model ends up being successful, that would be could be a pretty significant pivot point in how we approach localized management, in giving those folks the opportunity to do what would have been done in January, February, and early March during the regular season when they're out there anyway, and when they're going to be hunting. So those are some of the changes that we're implementing. Let me see if I had anything else, Commissioner Harrison. I think that's all.
Well, and I got a couple comments on what you said. Okay. On the surveys, I know we sent out 2 surveys, and surveys are a dangerous thing. Having professional help and actually designing those to where they actually give you the real information and not the information you want to hear. And to give you an example in the survey, one of them that caught my attention was, do you support having a healthy deer herd? 96% of people say yes. Really should be 100%. Who would not want a healthy deer herd? But alluding to some of the methods you're going to employ to accomplish that, that's a different question. And, you may not like the pill you have to swallow to accomplish that. So that leading question was a response to make you feel good about what you're doing. It may not have been the true assessment of what you need to be looking at. So, let's comment. And the second survey, for me, when I looked at it, it was almost exhausting, because it had a narrative section that you could fill out. I didn't have the patience to complete the thing, quite honestly. And the questions were good, but could you actually do statistical analysis on them and get a good statistical evaluation? Probably not. And, I don't know what the department does on survey development, or what type of psychological background, or those people that look at them, but we probably need some help on it. And I tell you, a friend of mine sent me a fur bearer survey. I think it'd be a really good idea if the commissioners all got surveyed on the survey, so we see what's coming out in front of us there. The target removal thing, the big controversy on that, Jason, usually revolves around the buck harvest. That's usually where the harvest is. A good deer manager that's following quality deer management is really focused on buck-doe ratio proportions, quality bucks, that sort of thing. And so, and I don't have an answer. I just pose challenges for you, but your receptionist and negative public response to target population management, if we were only harvesting does, would be much different than if we were taking bucks. And, I talked to Thomas, and he said, they try to be really conscientious about, harvesting trophy bucks. They don't want trophy bucks in the back of the truck. But then you get into harvest them in January, February, where they're shed, and then you don't know what you're taking. And, Thomas said he was real conscientious. If he had a landowner that said, we've got this buck that we don't want to harvest, they try to do their management earlier so they don't, but it's, most of the controversies that revolve around targeted management is in the buck harvest. And I don't know how to do it, but some serious consideration of really focusing on the does. And I know scientifically that goes against what we need to. I understand that because the density is about 4 times higher in the bucks than the does. So, and you know, and when you look at this where it's so challenging, if you aspire to quality deer management and you aspire to CWD management, they're a complete conflict. That's what we talked about last night. You're the expert on that. I don't have the answer, but I can't imagine the challenge with it, Jason. I really can't.
Yeah, it's a big challenge. You know, QDM or quality of management continues to rise in popularity at the same time that CWD is spreading. And so, you know, for some of the hunters, they're striving for a different population demographic in the deer population than what would be desirable from a CWD management and long-term health of the deer population standpoint. So I think it's a big communication challenge. You know, you've got, on one hand, you've got the desires for a deer population that looks, in the absence of CWD, would be fine, but with CWD, it's a threat to the population. So I think that's, again, a communication challenge for us to explain why that's not the best approach from the long-term health of the deer population.
And I agree. Our success compared to what adjacent states' success is outstanding. And we need to be communicating that better. We really do.
And I'll just, in response to one of your comments, Commissioner Harrison, about our surveys, so we do have a really robust human dimensions and social science program with folks that are trained, and that's their area of expertise. And so I will craft questions, send them up, and they're the experts in that field, so they'll come back to me and say, we need to word this differently, or we might want to add this question or that question. So it does get reviewed by them to ensure that it is a good statistical tool that we can use. In terms of the questions, so I think your comment was in regard to the survey that went out to hunters, to the random sample versus probably the public comment opportunity, because they were very different. So the public comment opportunity, of course, anybody could come to the website. They looked at the draft goals and objectives and said, are they reasonable or not? If not, why did you think they were not? And so that is a qualitative tool. So we had over 600 comments. I read every single one. But you're right, that the way that we would approach analysis of those comments is very different from the survey of the 70,000 hunters. So, and with the design of that survey, what we tried to do, we never tried to have leading questions, of course. And so the values question was its own question, where having a healthy deer population was one of many value-based questions. And then we had separate questions for like the regulations within the management zone and localized management like targeted removal, to try to make sure that we asked questions appropriately so that folks weren't being led one way or the other. So just wanted to mention that. Something that I didn't mention earlier that I've taken notes on in regard to targeted removal. I think a lot of times in terms of our targeted removal efforts, and it goes back to communication, but in almost all cases, the number of deer that we're removing to our target removal is less than what gets removed during the regular hunting season in most of those areas. And so sometimes there can be some misconceptions about higher numbers than what it really is. And on some particular tracts or parcels, it can be higher than others, clearly. But as a whole, if we look at the average number of deer removed per square mile in our core areas during the hunting season versus target removal, in almost all cases, targeted removal is going to be less.
And yeah, I'm going to say one more thing. I'm going to stop because we could visit all day on this, but you're absolutely right. The communication with the public of what's going on. Some of the things when I was talking to Thomas on, how he goes, how he approaches it. And I said, well, is that a consistent, that? He said, well, no, not really. He said, that's just how I do mine. I said, well, it needs to be. We need to have those type of guidelines set out for the people that are in the process of managing that. And, the only last comment I'm going to say, I really try to focus on areas that are criticism of the department, see if they're valid or not. Look for evidence, information that supports, but the public really needs to appreciate how much thought goes into these decisions behind the scene that you absolutely have no idea. And I can't appreciate, or I can't thank you enough for the sincerity in that, Jason. I know you put a lot of thought into this, and it's still challenging, very challenging, but the public really needs to know how sincere the staff is in actually looking at a very complicated topic.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Can I,
Yes, Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, just a very quick comment. I'm somewhat familiar with surveys and polls and the process of doing that. And the questions can always be tweaked one way or the other. And there is indeed science and subjectivity and objectivity that goes into that. The narrative comments, the verbatims that are often put in there, I know are helpful to organizations, elected officials, marketers, and so on. So I think even though many people, most people perhaps, don't get to those because they just run out of time when it says, I've got a 4-minute survey, which I dealt with this morning when I made a call about something to an unrelated thing. So I think those must be valuable to you, as opposed to the social media that you so aptly spoke about, Commissioner Harrison. Social media, the negative comments are typically those by nameless, faceless, critical people. And I'm quite confident that the vast majority of people that read the publications and the results of surveys and the programs have positive comments, but they statistically, from what I understand, don't historically spend time writing down comments. So you're getting good information from those verbatims in your surveys and with legitimate polls, and I would not rely upon the comments, the negative comments. They're worth reading. There is some value, some kernel of truth in some of those. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. I would just add, we have an incredible opportunity here. And we know and appreciate that the public trusts MDC to take care of nature. And we noted, as Commissioner Harrison did, that lower percentage who are trusting MDC to take care of CWD. And we're going to continue our conversations. We also have an appreciation for all of the surveillance work and data that we have, and we thank staff so greatly for giving us that our neighbor states do not have. And we have an opportunity to act. As a commission, you can tell this is an important topic, one that we take very seriously. And again, we just encourage the public engagement, and we are listening, and we just very much appreciate everybody's intention to this. Jason, thank you for your presentation today.
Appreciate that. Could I take one more minute and go back to a slide?
Sure.
You just reminded me, Commissioner Ocampo, of something I want to go back to, and Commissioner Harrison was asking a question. Bear with me for 1 second. I wanted to draw attention to the bottom row. So even though it was 64% that agreed, there was still 21% that didn't agree or disagree. So I wanted to draw attention to that so that folks weren't thinking that the balance there was the folks that disagreed. So we had 15% that disagreed, but we clearly have 1 in 5 that hasn't made a decision that we can influence through good communication.
Yep, and therein lies our opportunity, right? So
Yes.
excellent. Thank you,
Thank you.
Jason. Well done. So we are going to transition from a wildlife topic to a landscape topic. And I would like, Brian, would you introduce our next speakers? I apologize. We're going to hit the pause button and we will adjourn momentarily and come right back. Thank you. We are taking a 5-minute break.
Thank you.
5 minutes. I'm setting a
I
timer.
know how to
And we are back. Brian, you have our next set of introductions for our presentations.
Thank you. Sorry about that. The next two presenters are landscape ecologist John Podoliak and grassland systems manager Frank Longcarriage. And I'll introduce speakers now so we can keep it rolling. John Podoliak earned his bachelor's degree in biology with a concentration in environmental science and a minor in environmental science and policy. He performed undergraduate research on restored wetlands in northern New York State, studying plants, birds, and macroinvertebrates. He then went to earn a Master's of Science in Environmental Science and Ecology from the State University of New York in Brockport in Western New York. Following his master's, John worked briefly as a wetland scientist before moving to Missouri to pursue his PhD at the University of Missouri, studying fisheries and wildlife science. His research evaluated the Wetland Reserve Program easements and whether the program is providing wildlife habitat among other ecosystem services. John has worked at the Missouri Department of Conservation as a landscape ecologist since July of 2023, where he is actively involved in landscape planning and implementation of Landscape Health Index, as well as updates and implementation of the Comprehensive Conservation Strategy. Frank Longcarriage is a native of Neosho, Missouri, where he currently resides and is stationed. Frank earned his Bachelor of Science degree in biology at Missouri Southern State College and his Master's of Science degree in zoology at the University of Arkansas, where he studied the effects of fire and grazing of the greater prairie chickens for his thesis. Frank is a 19-year veteran of the Missouri Department of Conservation, spending the first 17 years of his career as a wildlife management biologist in Southwest Missouri. He is currently serving as Missouri's grassland systems manager, and he's served in that role since 2022. These gentlemen will be providing an update on the department's approach to landscape-level conservation with a focus on the department's grasslands work. And so first up will be John.
Good morning, and thank you for that introduction. Madam Chair, Commission, Director, it's a pleasure to be here today to give you an update on some of the grassland work and landscape conservation. So I'm going to start with a broader view of our landscape work and kind of nail down and tee up Frank for some of our grassland-focused work. So just to start, think about landscapes. What is a landscape? How did define landscape? We started in 2005 with our conservation opportunity areas, which were naturally based and geographic significant conservation potential throughout the state that represent great conservation. So partners such as Audubon Society, Forest Service, and then we moved from opportunity areas in we are now called drill down even, as a result of a strategic approach to identify key landscapes for conservation work across the state. And many of these were taken from overlays of important, significant focus by focusing on connectivity, resource quality. Maybe they were a focal landscape in a previous planning effort, as well as landowner support. So our priority geographies are really where we're working now, and these areas that offer the most conservation opportunity, albeit intact habitat cores or and so this is all part of the comprehensive conservation strategy, which is first a nationwide plan to kind of state action plan, state wildlife action plan, comprehensive document. I believe is to do this and working on it. You can see here some of the pieces of the comprehensive conservation strategy. So it's our state forest action plan, state wildlife action plan, as well as our actions around priority watersheds, public use, community conservation, which was hinted at before today. Those community conservation tiers are included in the overall comprehensive conservation strategy, among other efforts. And so here's just a look kind of across the state at our landscapes and our tiers. So tiers 1 and 2 lands encompass only 13.3% of the state. And these are our priority geographies and natural areas. These are the areas where we're focusing most of our work across the state. Not to be said that we aren't working elsewhere, but these are areas that we've identified as the most opportunity, the most bang for buck. And tier 2 is our COA networks outside of our priority geographies and natural areas. And then we have our tiers 1 through 4 total, which is about 50% of the state. So 50% of the state is prioritized under this plan. And tier 3 includes priority forest lands, quail restoration landscapes, priority watersheds. And then tier 4 is our, in blue here, is the remaining priority watersheds not prioritized at any higher level. So part of the work that I've worked on that was started before I came to the department, but I've plugged myself right in, is the Landscape Health Index, which is a tool that was developed by partners at MU and staff from MDC to monitor and assess the priority geographies across the state. So we currently have 11 priority geographies. This tool was started to work in 2 priority geographies, Big Buffalo Creek and Spring Creek watershed as a pilot. And this Landscape Health Index incorporates landscape, biotic, and social factors, so several layers of data to calculate a weighted sum score from 0 to 1, essentially, of our health of our landscapes. So this slide here, I apologize, it's a little rougher to read than I'd hoped, kind of shows some of the data sets that go into the Landscape Health Index, as well as like a draft, what a dashboard may look like as we move forward with the Landscape Health Index. But we've got things like biotic indicators, so fish surveys, bird surveys, plant surveys, frogs surveys, social indicators, so support for the department, engagement from partners, and then landscape indicators, which are more of our remote sensing style data sets, so land cover, habitat condition, habitat quantity, things like that. Currently, one of the main things we're working on to move the Landscape Health Index forward and get it implemented is actually updating our social indicators aspect. So we have a really strong, robust social science team here at the department, and we are plugging them in to really increase our value and figure out how we are engaging the public in our priority geographies, and really actually leaning into that One Health framework as well, thinking about health of humans and the concept of conservation. And here's just another example of some of the data that we can get. So when I talked about landscape condition, we're to quantify kind of what the landscape at least currently looks like, we can use historic data sets, the ecological site descriptions of what may have been in a priority geography, and then current land cover to what the land cover currently looks like, which can help us assess and make future recommendations to what we want that landscape to look like. And I just wanted to show the priority geographies on a map, and the 2 in orange are the 2 pilot priority geographies where we piloted these data sets. Another piece that's really a big focus of, we have a strategic initiative called the Landscape Assessment and Monitoring, and that we are really working to work on what we're calling achievable desired future conditions with a focus on the priority geographies. So what do we want these geographies to look like? What can we manage them for based on what may have been there, but what's currently there, and recognizing we probably aren't going to get back to historic levels, but we'd like to be somewhere in between, moving our efforts forward. And these are quantifiable metrics that we can take to our private land managers, our public land managers, and give them goals to work toward within these geographies of increasing forest land cover, for example, or increasing grassland cover, habitat metrics for turkey, other species of interest. It's all about giving us quantifiable actions that the department can take to move forward towards these landscape level goals. And this diagram just shows our process that's kind of a structured decision-making process and a lot of modeling that goes on in the background, but we're really trying to do this from a focus of what management strategies are ongoing or may be taken within these geographies, as well as what are indicator species of the chosen type of landscape. So in a forested landscape, we may be looking at species such as a wood thrush or woodland landscape turkey, things like that, and using those to come to a decision about what can be done and what should be done to increase the value of habitat for those species. And the work I'm involved in and the landscape work overall at the department is not just Missouri. So when we think about landscapes, they don't follow state lines, watershed boundaries, things like that. And so myself and others are actually plugged into the Midwest Landscape Initiative, which is an initiative of federal and state and NGO partners, essentially to identify shared conservation opportunities across the Midwest. The diagram here is the Midwest Conservation Blueprint, which actually an updated version will be going live on October 31st. So that conservation blueprint is areas that have been prioritized across the entire Midwest, working with all of those partners that I previously mentioned. And other aspects that can be there that MLI works on is the Regional Species of Conservation Concern Database, and then also a big push for the Conservation Blueprint is using that for coordination for grant funding, which I'll explain in a bit, but Missouri was actually successful in using. Another sort of regional effort that Missouri is involved in is the Southeast Conservation Adaptation Strategy, which also has a blueprint. Missouri is part of both the Southeastern Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies in the Midwest, so we are uniquely able to be a part of both CCAS and MLI. And again, this brings together state, federal, and NGO partners. And these blueprints, actually, if you put them together and look in Missouri, they often both prioritize similar areas and also overlap with our priority geographies and our areas of priority. So kind of justifies that we're doing the right thing here in Missouri, but also across. And this has led to targeted conservation outcomes. So as I said, the Midwest Landscape Initiative Conservation Blueprint was actually used as part of the grant application for an America the Beautiful grant between Iowa and Missouri, which is to restore critical grassland restoration efforts in key landscapes. So that Grand River grasslands landscape that was presented earlier, as well as other grassland landscapes. Those landscapes were identified in statewide planning as well. So Grand River grasslands is priority geography. So with that, I'll let Frank.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Sumner, thank you for the opportunity to present today. It's always a good day to talk about grasslands. So let's get started. Grasslands have become nationally important, not just regionally, not just in Missouri, but nationally important due to the loss. We estimate that about 2.1 million acres of grassland are lost annually in the Midwest. And this these two maps show the amount of grassland that we had in 1992 here on the left, and in 2021. Note St. Louis is here where the yellow star is. What I want to point out is the large amount of grasslands that have been lost, especially in eastern and southern Missouri, compared to 1992. Up in the upper Midwest, seen a large-scale loss of grasslands, the southeast. But also troubling is the loss of grasslands in our traditionally grassland-dominated areas of Missouri, here on the western border. So this shows that we've lost a lot of grasslands across, and I think it shows a really good graphically how much grassland we've lost. And this loss of grasslands has resulted in a loss of biodiversity. Grassland birds are the fastest declining guild of birds in North America. They declined at a rate of about 53% since 1970, and meadowlarks, which we think are very common, have declined about 70% since then. So we've lost 3 out of 4 meadowlarks since 1970. Many rare grassland plants are declining. Of course, we talk about invertebrates. We have a host of bee species that are in decline. The regal fritillary butterfly, the monarch butterfly are both receiving national attention. And grassland mammals are losing biodiversity across the Midwest and in Missouri. So these grasslands are vital, and they are home to really great spots of biodiversity that are in decline. So I'm going to take a step back and look at where we've come from. At the time of settlement, Missouri had about 15 million acres of native grasslands, native prairie and savanna, or about 1/3 of the state. Today, we are down to about 40,000 acres of native prairie. When I talk about native prairie, I'm talking about land that's never been plowed, that's in the same state that it was at the time of settlement, large, or not necessarily large, but intact grasslands that are fairly undisturbed. And these native grasslands, as I mentioned before, are really especially great spots for biodiversity. They are hubs of biodiversity. They are critical to a lot of imperiled plant and animal species. So the loss of these grasslands has resulted in a decline of these grassland-dependent species. Now, moving into John's presentation, he teed me up quite nicely, and I appreciated that. He mentioned the America the Beautiful grant. And here, this is the part of the presentation where I kind of drill down into grassland landscape planning. And one of those planning efforts is the America the Beautiful grant, where this is grassland conservation across state lines. So we've got our partners up in Iowa in the Grand River grasslands, and the landscape that Brian talked about earlier, all the way down to southwest Missouri. And these are targeted in our Tier 1 geographies, and in some cases in our Tier 2 conservation opportunity areas. We have about $4.5 million over 5 years. We're going to be partnering with Quail Forever and TNC to hire strike teams to do grassland stewardship, such as prescribed fire, invasive species removal, tree removal. And also the Missouri Prairie Foundation has money for prairie acquisition. Another more recent focus for us in terms of landscape scale conservation for grasslands is this idea of creating model grassland landscapes. And these will be in our Tier 1 geographies. They're part of our recently stood up Missouri, our MDC Grassland Strategic Initiative. This follows our well-established conservation, comprehensive conservation strategy. And basically, these model landscapes, I'm just going to briefly touch on them here. In the next slides, we'll spend some more time talking about them. But there are 10,000 acre landscapes, 10,000 acre blocks or units. And within that, we want a 2,000 acre protected core of grasslands with an additional 2,000 acres of scattered matrix grasslands around that. So let's look at this in a really stylized, perfect world example. So the black buffer demonstrates our 10,000 acre landscape. The yellow shapefile indicates our protected core. And then the blue shapes surrounding that indicate our matrix grasslands, or those 2,000 acres of additional scattered grasslands. Now, I want to point out a couple of things. This is a highly stylized, perfect world version, right? The core, for example, does not have to be in the middle. It could be on the north, the south. It could be anywhere in here. I want to point out that these scattered matrix grasslands do not have to touch the core. These species that we're talking about are mobile. They can move from grassland to grassland. So as long as we provide connectivity in this landscape, we don't have to necessarily have property or grassland that touches the core. It can be scattered throughout that matrix. And that's how we want it. We would like it to be scattered throughout the matrix. These grasslands don't have to be in native prairie. They could be native prairie. They could also be CRP plantings. They could be EQIP plantings, prairie restorations, prairie reconstructions, all of those things that add up to creating grassland. So they don't have to be native prairie, but they can be. These matrix grasslands don't have to necessarily be in public ownership. It would be nice, certainly, and this is what I'm going to talk about later, this is a good place to focus acquisition efforts, but we don't necessarily have to, or a partner doesn't necessarily have to own these matrix grasslands. And in fact, we're going to have to rely on our private land partners a great deal to achieve a lot of this work, because we can't do this all on our own. We're going to have to rely on our private land partners. Now, the core, it needs to be protected by some conservation organization. Could be Missouri Prairie Foundation, could be TNC, could be MDC. It needs to be protected, but I just wanted to point out that the scattered grasslands do not necessarily have to be in public ownership. And what these model landscapes do is they really help us drill down and create lasting and resilient grassland landscapes in places where we're going to have the most success, and it really helps us focus acquisition efforts and focus more intensely our private land focus. So I want to show a couple of real-world examples here that we've got in Missouri on the ground right now. The map on the right here is the Grand River grasslands. This is a model landscape that has a well-developed core. It's got scattered matrix grasslands around. In this situation, all of these grasslands are connected, but again, they don't have to be. We've got a great start here. There's opportunity to add in on the south and add in on the north. But the cool thing about this is if we continue to build this out, then we'll be connecting to the next grassland complex up to the northwest. Then we can start to see the real building of a true landscape. The other example is one that needs a little more work. This is in the high lonesome geography, kind of in west central Missouri. This is our core. This is MDC ownership here. This is Missouri Prairie Foundation ownership here. Again, this core is in the southern part of this 10,000-acre landscape. We've got a good start up here with Moore Conservation Area in terms of our matrix grasslands. This represents a private landowner that is adding to the effort. But you can see that this really focuses where we should be thinking about future acquisitions and future-focused private lands work. So these are a couple of real-world examples in the state. And the current work that the Grassland Strategic Initiative Working Group is working on right now is identifying where in the state these cores should be in these Tier 1 geographies. So that's our current work right now. So in closing, I want to kind of make this grassland connection and putting this all together. First of all, here is the high lonesome area that I just showed, high lonesome here. So here's our landscape. But if we can start building these matrix grasslands through strategic acquisitions, through private landowner work, then we can start to connect up to the next grassland complex that's up here to the northwest. And this is how we can really build large, resilient grassland systems. And a point I want to really make here is that, again, acquisitions are important, easements are important, but our private landowners are really going to be vital in this effort. And one of the things that we've done a few places in the state, but we hope to do more, is this idea of grass banking or deferred grazing. And here's an example I want to show you. This gentleman right here, he planted native grass on his land, but he needed somewhere to go with his cattle for the first year or two for establishment purposes, right? So the area manager allowed him grazing on our conservation area. These are ways that we can incentivize landowners by saying, look, If you'll put native grasses on your property in exchange for doing that for wildlife purposes or forage purposes, whatever the case may be, we'll allow you to graze on MDC land on places that really need grazing anyway, right? So these are great ways that we can make that private land connection and truly build these model landscapes. So that's all I have. John and I would be glad to take any questions.
Commission, any questions for John or Frank?
Appreciate the presentation. I'm sure you're aware the commission's really focused on bird grant acquisition. You know, that's been a big focus for us, and you know, really very attentive to this topic. Appreciate the information.
Yes, and I appreciate that.
Yes, Mark?
Back to the comment about the America Beautiful grant for grasslands. I remember some discussion about that. 'Cause I know we're working with that with Iowa. Is that correct on that?
Yes.
Didn't we have a press conference or some kind of a celebration or some acknowledgement of when that took place?
Yes, there was a kind of not necessarily a ribbon cutting, but a celebration of that. I think the Secretary of Interior came
Secretary of Interior
down.
was there, that's right.
Yes. This was up in the Grand River grasslands. So yeah, this was a big deal for us, for the state of Iowa, for Drake University, who's the Student Job Corps that Brian talked about. This is going to really be a big deal for us. Plus, not only is it that part of the state, but it really covers much of the western part of the state. So it's going to add a lot of lift to our grassland management.
Was that like a year ago or 2 years ago?
Yeah, it was about a year ago.
Okay.
Yeah, that we were awarded the grant.
Yeah, Secretary of Interior. Okay, right. Thank you.
Go ahead, Commissioner Wagner. Yeah.
Very quick question. You mentioned, I think, the comprehensive conservation strategy be, ongoing. When was it initiated? Around 2005, did I hear or say? Is it a written, more detailed document that exists that's
Yeah.
periodically that you can see, and also more detailed descriptions of tier 1 through 4? I've seen that. I've seen the materials, but I don't know that I've really burrowed into what those colors mean on the map of Missouri.
Sure. So the Comprehensive Conservation Strategy was first published by the state, I think, in 2015 or 2020, one of those two dates. It is basically replacing our state forest action plan and our state wildlife action plan, which has to be updated every 10 years. So in that is provided to the Fish and Wildlife Service and Forest Service. And it is a comprehensive document that is available on our website, but we can send it straight to you, get you that information. As far as definitions for the geographies, let me just kind of go back through while I'm talking about them. So our tier 1 geographies, that's our priority geographies and natural areas. Tier 2 is the COA networks that were developed, those starting in 2005. Then you've got tier 3, the green areas, which include the priority forest landscapes, quail restoration landscapes, and certain priority watersheds. And then tier 4 are the remaining priority watersheds not previously prioritized.
Thank you. Go back on the web.
Gentlemen, I would just like to say I appreciate, Frank, your almost 2 decades of service to the agency. I know this is something you're incredibly passionate about. John, welcome in your, I guess, year and a half with being with us. And I really appreciate how this landscape initiative allows us to zoom out, but also remain incredibly focused. So thank you guys for all of your efforts. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have budget, and that would be Andrew.
Would be Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm going to offer you a respite from my normal presentation and bring up Ms. Melanie Crane. She is a long-term MDC employer, over 24 years experience. She is the current interim Chief Budget Officer. So she will be providing the report with your permission.
Chairman. Please excuse my voice. Members of the commission and Director Summers, I'll be presenting the fiscal year 2025 financial summary report through September 2024. The report has been provided in your advance materials. And so to begin, if you would direct your attention to the revenue variances. Total revenues in fiscal year 25 through September 2024 were 5.2% lower than fiscal year 2024 through September 2023, and 1.2% above expectations for this point in the fiscal year. Conservation sales tax receipts were 2.2% above the same time period in fiscal year 24 and 1.9% above expectations. Permit revenues were 5.8% higher in the first quarter of fiscal year 25 compared to fiscal year 24 and 1.6% above expectations. The number of monetary hunting and fishing permits sold during the first quarter of fiscal year 25 were 7,514, lower than the previous year. Federal reimbursements were 34.3% lower than this time last year and 2.4% below expectations. Federal reimbursements for fiscal year 25 through September represent approximately 15.8% of total revenues. Other revenue sources for the first 3 months of fiscal year 25 were 13% higher than this point last fiscal year and 3.1% above expectations. And next, if you'll take a look at the expenditure variances in your report, the total operating expenditures for the first 3 months of fiscal year 25 were 2.3% higher than the first 3 months of fiscal year 24 and 3.6% below expectations. Operating expenditures include personal services, expenses, and equipment purchases. Personal service disbursements were 7.4% above the previous fiscal year and in line with expectations through September 2024. Increases from the previous year include the labor market rate adjustment approved by the Commission, which was effective July 1st, 2024, and the 10% medical premium increase effective January 1st, 2024, and adjustments to retirement contributions. Expenses were 5.2% lower than fiscal year 24 and 11.7% below expectations for the first 3 months of fiscal year 25. Equipment disbursements were 50.3% lower than the first quarter of fiscal year 24 and 4.1% below expectations. The variance in expenditures from the previous year is mainly due to large payments in the first quarter of fiscal year 24, which included fleet replacements and mobile radio replacements. Total capital disbursements were 24.5% lower than the previous fiscal year through September and 11.2% below the budgeted amount at this point in the fiscal year. Capital expenditures include land conservation partnerships and construction. Large construction payments in September included work for the Bennett Spring Fish Hatchery renovations, the Springfield Conservation Nature Center roof replacement, the Fountain Grove Conservation Area Phase 2 pump station replacement, the Shell Osage Conservation Area Phase 1 pump station development, and the August A. Bush Memorial Conservation Area exterior building renovations. Land payments in September were for additions to Morris Prairie Conservation Area and Pawnee Prairie Conservation Area. Total disbursements for the first quarter of fiscal year 25 were 3.8% lower than the first quarter of fiscal year 24 and 5% below expectation. This concludes my remarks on the fiscal year 25 financial summary through September 2024, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yep. Commissioner McHenry?
Yes, thank you very much. You gave us some detail in relationship to expenses as far as some of the, I'll say, larger percentages. Back on the revenue side of it, could you touch on that 34.3% related to federal reimbursements?
Yeah, the difference there is mainly from timing issues with Pittman Robertson grants.
That's traditionally kind of what happens too, is that correct?
Correct.
So further in the year that changes, okay.
We actually had a drawdown this week, so
Okay, all right.
you'll see some
To level out, okay.
between what we did this year and what we did last
Okay.
year.
All right. Thank you.
I also had a question on revenues. You highlighted a reduction in the number of permits sold. Could you repeat that?
There were 7,514 lower than the previous year.
Thank you. Commissioner, any other questions for Melanie? Thank you, Melanie, very much. Next, we have Jacob on the heels of a successful ribbon cutting. With more to come, right, Jacob?
Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Director Sumner. I have your next 3 agenda items. First is a summary of the major construction projects that are in your advanced materials. On the first page of the report, under the maintenance and repairs category on line 4 at the Southwest Regional Office, shop and storage buildings exterior renovations project, the design is now complete and the project is in the queue for bidding. Line 5 at Springfield Conservation Nature Center, the roof replacement project, the contractor is doing very well as of the date of the report on October 7th. The work was 85% complete. And then on line 6 at Chesapeake Fish Hatchery, the roof replacement on the hatchery building project, that project is 10% complete. On line 8 at Bush Memorial Conservation Area, the exterior renovations on the regional office is 20% complete. Then on line 10, Central Regional Office exterior column repairs, we did conduct a bid opening yesterday. Unfortunately, we did not receive any bids, so we will be contacting the plan holders, trying to get feedback and understanding from them why they chose not to bid before we make any adjustments and re-advertise that for bids. On line 13 at the nursery, the septic system repairs project, the design is complete and it is in queue for bidding. And then on line 15, the Conservation Commission headquarters, the site renovation project that was mentioned previously in the commission meeting. The contractor's doing very well. They're 10% complete. I appreciate everybody's patience and understanding as we work through that project. I know it is a disruption to our regular operations, but in the end, we'll have a much better campus and a more reliable utility service for the headquarters. In the rehabilitations category on line 18 at Roaring River Fish Hatchery, that liquid oxygen line improvement project, the design is complete and it is in queue for bidding. On line 21 at 10 Mile Pond Conservation Area, the well improvements project is 70% complete. There's just a few electrical components that we're waiting on from the fabricator to get installed in the electrical panels before we can take ownership of those pumps, those wells and pumps, and start utilizing the infrastructure. So we hope to have that resolved relatively soon. Contractor is working very well with us to address that. On line 24, the Conservation Commission headquarters, I'm sorry, I spoke to that already. So on page 2, there's a lot of construction activity happening across the state. On capital improvements category, line 3 at the Discovery Center, the entrance canopy replacement project, it's 20% complete. They should be erecting steel relatively soon, so I'll have some pictures to share that show the new structures taking shape there. On line 4 at Hornersville Swamp Conservation Area, the road and parking lot improvements project, that design is complete and it is in queue for bidding as well. We'll have a very active bidding activity this winter. Line 7 at Columbia Bottom Conservation Area, the entrance road relocation project is 10% complete. And then on lines 10 through 16, those are all the hatchery residence projects. At the previous commission meeting, you had asked for a schedule. You'll see there in the middle of the page there that the dates have been filled out for expected construction timelines. just a reminder to the commission that those are being constructed by regional staff. We're working very closely with them to help them be prepared for all the work that's coming ahead. You will note on line 11 at Bennett Spring Fish Hatchery, the residence replacement project, that construction has started there, as well as on line 15 at Honeywell Lake Conservation Area, that residence has also started construction. Okay. On line 17 at Bennett Spring Fish Hatchery, the hatchery renovation project is 20% complete. Contractor is making progress on the intake structure, the flood wall, and much of the distribution piping to the lower raceways. And then the feed storage building is also getting sheathed in. So good progress there to report. On line 18 at J. Thad Ray Memorial Wildlife Area, the shop addition project is 15% complete. On line 19 at Ted Shanks Conservation Area, the hazardous material storage building project, notice to proceed was issued September 3rd, and the contractor has mobilized on site as of last week. So that's going to get moving pretty fast here. And then last on line 20, Apple Creek Conservation Area, the service road improvements project, that design is complete and it is also in queue for bidding. So a lot of projects highlighted there, but happy to answer any questions before I proceed.
Commissioner McHenry?
Yes, thank you, Jake, very much. Question on the, I'll say they're peach colored, these ones that are related to the residencies.
Yes.
Those are being done in-house, correct?
That is
As you
correct.
mentioned. One is under construction, the rest of them.
Two are under construction.
And then it says contract yet to be advertised. Is that for the sub-trades, or how does that factor into it?
There are some components of the work that we will advertise for to supplement the workforce.
So there is something going external on that then?
Yes, but they're relatively small projects like seamless gutters, maybe some HVAC work, things like that, where there's specialty work that will be beneficial to have the contractor.
So that's why that is listed in that category?
Yes, sir.
And the other ones I think you mentioned that are listed under contract yet to be advertised that are going out for complete construction, you said they're in the queue, right?
That is
Which
correct.
means it's a matter of getting the documents together and externalize it.
Yep.
Of those, I think you mentioned about 4 of them. You anticipate any of those being accepted and recommended for consideration at our next board meeting in December?
Most of those are below the reporting threshold for the commission. So I do not expect that those will be at the December or the next meeting in January.
Would you anticipate anything coming in December
No, not
this time?
not above $1 million.
Thank you.
Commissioner Anderson?
I just had 2 questions. One, on the second page, number 5, I think it was number 5, the intermediate raceways at Bennett, that's all done then? Is that correct?
The raceways at Shepherd of the Hills, yes.
Except for the hills, yeah.
Yeah, it is all complete. It's being used.
And, well, it's kind of 3 points to my question, but then Roy River on page 1, number 16. Now, we inquired about that actually last May, and the design was complete. I know they have a temporary oxygen line down there, plus they have a critical water problem down there. But it still says on this that it's not yet advertised, and I'm kind of struggling with what's going on there.
So if you recall from your questions previously, we were bundling that with the propane line project at Roaring River because we're doing directional boring. So it was most effective to have one contractor come in and do directional boring on the 2 different projects because it's all CCC era historic stonework that we needed to minimize disruption on. So the temporary oxygen lines are serving their needs. And we had the next 2 projects, or next 2 agenda items that we needed to get through the bidding process before we went to the Roaring River liquid oxygen line bid advertisement. So we have 2 individuals on our team that do all the advertising for all the projects across the state. And so it's a matter of managing risk and metering out the work.
Well, it's kind of a multiple-purpose question. I know Brian's here and Bruce isn't, but, you know, we got next year to look at on our fish production, and then we've got water reduction problems, and we've got Bennett behind schedule. I mean, it looks like the perfect storm for a real problem for next year. just seems like to split it up, if that's having an adverse effect on our potential trout production, maybe that's not the most prudent approach to it. That's just a comment.
I understand your concerns. The liquid oxygen temporary lines that we have are serving their intended purpose. There's no disruption to the delivery of the liquid oxygen. Those fish are not in jeopardy because of the temporary lines. And if you remember, when you first came onto the commission, we were doing the water intake renovation project there. We also renovated the recirculation pumps and the water control ability that they have at the hatchery there. So even in these low water conditions, they've been able to better manage water flow because of that project we did about 5 years ago. Okay.
But anyway,
Yeah.
it's a kind of a group concern on that is all, and probably more directed towards Brian and Bruce. But anyway, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions before we move on to the action items? Okay, Jacob, proceed.
One other item to highlight for you in your infrastructure asset management dashboard, you look at the center, the roof sector, percent expected life. Currently, 33% of those roof sectors are past their expected life. You'll note in my report there were several roof replacement projects, so as we complete those projects and those new assets are recorded in the system, then this percentage will improve. Just an item to point out. And then in the pie chart on the lower right, you'll see the total replacement cost of the infrastructure portfolio is approaching $2 billion. In the Northwest region, all the assets in the Northwest region represent about 16% of those replacement costs. Right. Next, I have an action item for the commission. It's a recommendation for authorization to enter into a contract with Rademacher Brothers Excavating Company Incorporated of Pleasant Hill, Missouri, for construction of the Shell Osage Conservation Area lake renovation and wetland renovation projects located in Shell City, Missouri, at a total estimated cost of $28,980,938.25. It is further requested a contingency fund of $1,500,000 be authorized for unforeseen conditions or other changes necessary to complete the project. Total authorization requested is $30,480,938.25. The project was designed by Ducks Unlimited Incorporated and MSI Engineering of Illinois. The engineer's estimate for the project was $34,657,066.74. 4 bids were received for the project as shown in your advanced materials. Rademacher Brothers Excavating Company has been in business for 34 years. They have completed large heavy highway projects for MoDOT, large earthwork projects for the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, as well as other medium and large-scale public works projects in central Missouri. Infrastructure Management Branch recommends the bid as submitted by the low bidder be accepted.
Thank you, Jacob. Commission, any questions for Jacob? Yes.
4 bids is very good. That's good to see that, good competition. It's also good to see a bid lower than the estimate, which is welcome news. I know you've got contingency on top of what your bid is, so hopefully that all works out in the long term. Thank you to DU for doing the design work. That comes at no cost to MDC, is my understanding.
Yes.
Also, for the record, we do have a pump station now that has been constructed along the Osage River. So that's kind of like phase 1, I believe, is my understanding.
That was phase 1, correct, sir.
Right. And then we have, of course, the wetlands was phase 2 and the lake was phase 3. So we're combining all that together. So with this contract award plus the pump station, about a year from now, approximately, will we be 100% complete at that point in time?
So this is a 320 working day contract. So if we have good weather, that's more like 2 years.
Okay, I understand. It's weather driven. I understand
Yes.
that. Okay.
But
So, anyway, in the future.
so after this work is complete, then we will need to install the 3-phase power line in the levees that this contract would construct to then connect to the pump station. And then we would have a complete project.
Power gets to the pump station. Is that how that works? Okay, that's my questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Harrison?
Just a couple, and really probably more for the public record than anything. You know, we talked about this at length yesterday, and 320-day contract. I know we all get nervous about extended contract time, so there's some contingencies in there if it goes over, that sort of thing, correct?
Correct.
And, you know, the other thing, just to bring the public attention, I mean, this is the second biggest contract that we've voted on since I've been on the commission. And, I mean, the waterfowlers, they really need to appreciate the type of commitment the commission's making, you know, to these intensive managed wetlands, because the question that I ask a lot on this is of dollars spent, who's benefiting, and the dollars put into it. And, you know, bringing the public attention, and I think we're gonna have some further discussion on other people that benefit from these areas rather than just waterfowlers. And I think that warrants some further discussion. So as a public that's assessing how we're spending taxpayers' dollars, you know, we're looking at it very seriously, and we're looking at who's benefited and how the monies are being effective. And so I want that to be on the public record for the meeting when we vote on this.
Do I have a motion? All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Applause from the crowd. All right, Jacob, proceed.
Next agenda item is also an action item for the commission. It is a recommendation for authorization to enter into a contract with Flowmaster Construction LLC of Mexico, Missouri for construction of the Eagle Bluffs Conservation Area Pump Station Flood Repairs Project located in Columbia, Missouri, at a total estimated cost of $1,518,964.00. It is further requested a contingency fund of $76,000 be authorized for unforeseen conditions or other changes necessary to complete the project. Total authorization requested is $1,594,964.00. The project was designed by Custom Engineering Incorporated. The engineer's estimate for the project was $1,186,142.00. 3 bids were received for the project as shown in your advanced materials. Flowmaster Construction LLC has been in business for 19 years. They have completed medium and large-scale public works and commercial projects in mid-Missouri and the St. Louis City area. Infrastructure Management Branch recommends the bid as submitted by the low bidder be accepted.
I will correct my order here. Do I have a motion? We're going to have, okay, so we have a motion. Do I have a second? Okay. Any discussion?
I'm just going to add to my earlier comment. You know, we had a public presentation, it's been about a year ago, I believe, on criticizing, you know, how well that we support wetland management. And both big action items here today are basically big financial dollars on supporting managed wetland. Matter of fact, that's all we're voting on. And so again, I want to emphasize that those folks really appreciate what's going on with the department. So that's my comment.
Commissioner Henry?
Well, I'll add to that. We can consider this kind of be the wetlands meeting if we want to go back and talk about this. We are in Chillicothe, and we had a great event yesterday for the pump station here at Fountain Grove, which is a big project, as we all know, with several years and several conversations and several dollars. And now we, of course, have made a recommendation for what we're going to be doing in relationship to Shell Osage, which action has taken place. So I guess it's the third item that we're going to recommend approval of the work at Eagle Bluff. So there again, this is the wetlands conversation meeting that we are taking place in Chillicothe today. So those are my comments, Madam Chair.
Robust discussion. Commissioner Wagner.
Just a very brief tag onto that. We've talked waterfowling and wetlands. And wetlands and all of these projects are clearly much more about waterfowling than waterfowling. And we've heard about the grasses, we've heard about all the other animals, the fish, the wildlife. And so these are comprehensive projects that go far beyond one outdoors person's interest in waterfowling. And we'll hear more about this as we go forward.
Wetland projects are very complex engineering and interfacing with biology and habitat needs. And so they do take a little longer to develop, but they're very rewarding for a whole suite of species across the user groups that we serve.
All right, I will call a vote. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you very much.
Jacob, appreciate it.
All right, Deputy Director Jeffries.
Good morning, Commissioners. I have the next 4 agenda items, starting with agenda item number 9, seeking the Commission's approval to purchase approximately 130 acres in Livingston County as an addition to Fountain Grove Conservation Area. The property is predominantly bottom and hardwood riparian forest, and with approximately 1 mile of the Grand River, which I think yesterday was right at the pump station. You can see it on the other side. I think that's the first time we actually saw land that was going to be proposed. So I'm seeking the Commission's approval on this action item.
Yeah, pretty nice timing. Do I have a motion?
Second.
All right, any discussion?
It is the wetlands meeting.
Yeah. That's right.
So I just want to retitle it. So there you go.
Any further discussion on this action item? I will call a vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Deputy Director.
Thought we might get an applause from the crowd there from our Commissioner Emeritus.
Oh, Jeff, would you like to applaud?
All right, next action item, agenda item number 10, seeking Commission's approval to purchase approximately 48 acres in Crawford County as an addition to Blue Springs Conservation Area. Tract adjoins Blue Springs Conservation Area on 2 sides with 0.7 miles of common border and eliminates future access issues to this tract. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
All right, any discussion? I would like to highlight, like you said, this acquisition simplifies management of an existing area. It's directly adjoining to a conservation area.
And I might, Madam Chairman, that this also touches upon the Merrimack River. We have the White River and the Merrimack River. I'd like to change the nature of this meeting from wetlands to wetlands and rivers.
No. All right, I will call a vote on this land acquisition. Distinctly different than the meeting name. All in favor of this land acquisition, signal aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, motion carries. Deputy Director.
Commissioners, as you have seen over the past several meetings, we have been taking a good hard look at the property that the Commission currently owns here in the state. Through the land conservation strategy, we've been looking at these small properties that had very little public use, and we are working through a disposal list at this time. So the next 2 action items are potential disposals for your consideration. The first is seeking Commission's approval to dispose of the Lewis Arlene Bozel Outdoor Education Area, approximately 8.5 acres in Texas County, by reversion to the family of the original donor. This tract was originally donated by the Bozel family for education site, but really hasn't fit that purpose. Thank you.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Did you get that, Nicole? Okay. Do I have a second? All right, any discussion? All right, hearing none. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Same sign. Motion carries. Deputy Director.
Next item is agenda item number 12, seeking Commission's approval to dispose of the Lennox Tower site, approximately 5.9 acres in Dent County. This tower site includes an old fire tower and is no longer being utilized by the department.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on this?
Just wanted to kind of tag on to Aaron's comments about our comprehensive land strategy. As you can see, we have here before us this vote on this last item. We are acquiring 2 pieces, but we're also disposing of 2 pieces. So when you talk about something being comprehensive, that's what you do. You look at all properties, you look at their value and their importance to our system as far as additions, and then when you start doing that, of course, you look at things that may no longer fit as part of our system. So I think it's a good example of being comprehensive in how we're doing business.
Any further discussion? I will call a vote. All in favor, aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Deputy Director. Okay, Brian, you may have gotten light duty on regulations, but you got to come back for 2.
Happy to do so. Good morning again, Madam Chair, Commissioner, and Director Sumners. I have the following action item related to it is an action item for the Commission related to a timber sale. As you know, the Department maintains an active forest management program on conservation areas using a variety of practices, including forest thinning, controlled use of fire, tree planting, and the commercial harvest of timber. These management tools are used to enhance the health and diversity of forests and woodland national communities and provide multiple benefits to both wildlife and Missouri citizens. This action item is listed on as item 13 on your agenda. This timber sale on the Sunklands Conservation Area in Shannon County, if it is approved, this harvest will improve forest health and long-term sustainability by using an uneven-aged and even-aged management treatments, which will replicate a natural woodland structure, and this will increase sunlight to the forest floor, which will encourage oak and pine regeneration. This approach will create a diverse wildlife habitat as well as increase native grasses and forbs. And as such, we request your approval to advertise and sell an estimated 991,922 board feet of timber located on 646 acres of compartment number 9 of Sunklands Conservation Area in Shannon County.
Thank you, Brian. Do I have a motion? A second?
Second.
All right, any discussion? Yes, Commissioner McHenry.
Just to state under 1 million board feet. And then I know we've kind of had a goal over the last few years about how many board feet in the course of a year. Do we track that by fiscal year or by calendar year?
That's a very good question. Yeah, we have a kind of a management goal of trying to harvest a certain number of board feet. Right, we're targeting right around 14 million board feet. Right. That's not necessarily like a have-to-have thing for us. That's just our goal. We're looking at things like our ability to inventory certain compartments, staff capacity, the markets, contractor availability, kind of what the timber market is doing. We've been able to actually exceed that goal pretty substantially the last several years. Market right now is a little soft, and so we've kind of saturated, meaning timber industry's kind of saturated the market, so it's a little softer. We're hitting right around, I think we're on track right now. We're around 3 million board feet that's been marked right now and ready for sale. And that includes this sale if it moves forward. We know right now we've got many other sales that are marked and ready to go. We'll probably be bringing some more in December and then again early in the year to the commission for consideration. So we've asked John Tuttle's group, the regions, the Regional Resource Management Group, to give us kind of a status of where we're at for this rest of the fiscal year. And then we intend to also bring to the commission, administration and then the commission's attention where we're at for running average over the last, say, 3 to 4 years, so we can kind of see kind of how we've been tracking that. And that's really for our benefit as well, kind of how we've not only been able to meet that goal, but exceed it in some areas. So that's going to help us with our overall forest management practices. So there is kind of an overall report coming.
Good response.
Yeah, good question. Thank you.
Excellent. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Brian. So with no further business, I hereby adjourn our meeting, and all of those heading out into the woods and wilderness, I wish you happy hunting, and please be safe.